Chapter 1087, Broken Young Shuang. Senior Brother Tang. The students of the Eastern Institution were all overjoyed upon seeing him appear. They had still been anxious a moment ago, yet they all recovered their confidence now. It was as if his appearance had caused them to suddenly grow a backbone. This youth was none other than Tang Jiao, and his battle prowess was ranked 9th out of all the students in the Eastern Institution. He had a cultivation level at the peak stage of the consummate level, and he could even surpass 3 stars. He was a once-in-10,000 years super genius. On a side note, he was called Tang Jiao because his battle prowess was ranked 9th right now. He had been called Tang Shi several decades ago, and there was a possibility that he would be called Tang Ba or Tang Qi and so on in the future one. Release him. Tang Jiao said coldly. His eyes were as bright as 2 fireballs, and his exposed arms were covered with crimson divine patterns. These divine patterns extended all the way from the back of his hands to his shoulders, and looked as if they had been drawn with some sort of red metal. He was confident, and he was domineering. These were qualities that elites needed to possess. Ling Han trampled Yang Shuang under his feet. He was treating Yang Shuang exactly as Yang Shuang had treated Jin Zui. He would definitely not let him off lightly. He looked at Tang Jiao, and said, "Why should I?" "Because I, Tang Jiao, said so." Tang Jiao said in a sinister voice. He was already seething with fury because Ling Han had actually dared to speak back to him. Ling Han shook his head, and said, "Tang Jiao? I've never heard of such a person. You're seeking death." Tang Jiao didn't speak any more nonsense, and immediately charged toward Ling Han. Shua! A chilly light flashed toward Ling Han's throat. A curved bow had appeared in Tang Jiao's hands at some point in time, and it had fired a devastating burst of light toward Ling Han. Ling Han threw a kick, launching Yang Shuang into the air. Pooh! The chilly light instantly cut into Yang Shuang's rear, causing blood to spurt through the air. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, "Tisk, TSK, TSK, is there some forbidden love between you two? Why are you aiming for his S?" Yang Shuang looked at Tang Jiao with an aggrieved expression. "Can't you aim a bit better? Why are you attacking me?" Tang Jiao flared up in rage. He jabbed his finger toward Ling Han, and shouted, "Release him if you have any balls. Then we can fight without restraint." Ling Han shook his head, and said, "This isn't a hostage. Rather, it's my new treasured sword. It can be called a human sword, and it can also be called a B*TCH human one." He was holding onto Yang Shuang's neck, and under the influence of his origin power, Yang Shuang's body could only remain straight and rigid. As such, he was forcefully used as a sword by Ling Han. Yang Shuang wanted to die. Didn't he just snatch Ling Han's sword? Was there a need to humiliate him so much? "Ling Han, your actions make me despise you." Tang Jiao tried to provoke Ling Han. "Who are you? Do I need to take your thoughts seriously?" Ling Han scoffed. Tang Jiao boiled with anger. Great, he had failed to provoke Ling Han, and had instead ended up being infuriated himself. "You came to cause trouble in our Eastern Institution, so we definitely can't let you return in one piece," he threatened viciously. "Junior Brother Yang, endure your misfortune. The Academy's face is more important than you." Tang Jiao attacked with his full strength, not holding back any longer. Ling Han raised his sword to parry. With his current power, wielding a person was naturally nothing too difficult. Meanwhile, Yang Shuang had descended into an even more wretched situation. Not only did he have to endure Ling Han's sword intent, but he even had to face Tang Jiao's relentless attacks head-on. Only a few blows had been exchanged, yet dozens of his bones had already been broken. If this continued, it was entirely possible that he would be killed. Ling Han casually tossed Yang Shuang aside. It would genuinely be excessive if he continued to use him like a sword. Right now, he had only left Yang Shuang with severe injuries. In addition, he was the one in the right. If he killed him, however, the commotion and trouble that followed would be extremely difficult to deal with. There was no need to go so far. Watch how I smash you into pulp. Tang Jiao let out a roar, not caring about anything else. His attacks became even more ferocious and wild. Hee hee. Ling Han chuckled as he unleashed the 7-kill subduing soul technique. Tang Jiao's attacks instantly faltered, and he could only muster his defenses hastily as he watched Ling Han's fist smash over. There were relatively few secret techniques that cultivated the divine sense, and this was also the reason for the 7-kill subduing soul technique being so valuable. Although Tang Jiao possessed a higher cultivation level, his divine sense wasn't necessarily more powerful than Ling Han's. As a result, his battle prowess instantly fell by a great amount after being struck by Ling Han's divine sense attack. The two of them continued to battle, and Ling Han continuously used his 7-kill subduing soul technique to suppress the battle prowess of his opponent, dragging him down to a similar level as himself. Tang Jiao was crazy with rage. His battle prowess was clearly powerful enough to crush Ling Han, yet he was always forced to falter due to the indefensible spiritual attacks from his opponent. This caused his attacks to lose fluidity, resulting in him only being able to unleash 10 to 20% of his full power. He had never felt so constrained in a battle before. He was so vexed that he almost wanted to vomit blood. Meanwhile, the spectating students were all stunned. Is Ling Han trying to defy the heavens? How many stars has his battle prowess surpassed? It isn't Ling Han's battle prowess that's incredible. Rather, this situation is because senior brother Tang's battle prowess has been weakened. But even if it's been weakened, that's still due to the ability of Ling Han. This can also be counted as part of Ling Han's battle prowess, right? The spectating students all exchanged glances. After all, secret techniques pertaining spiritual attacks were far too rare. In fact, they were so rare that barely anyone still cultivated their divine sense to defend against such attacks. That being the case, did this count as Ling Han elevating his tier-surpassing battle prowess? Was his battle prowess at the late stage of the consummate level, or was it 3 stars above the peak stage? The two exchanged a few more blows before Tang Jiao angrily leaped to the side. Fuck it. He would go mad if they continued to fight. There was no way for him to unleash his full battle prowess, and this made him feel extremely constrained and uncomfortable. Done fighting? Ling Han asked with a smile. Tang Jiao didn't reply, and merely glowered at Ling Han. After a moment, he flicked his sleeves and left. He was genuinely unable to stop Ling Han. Moreover, his opponent had only just advanced to the high extreme, while he had already been at the consummate level for many years. He was completely picking on the weak. He had failed to win, so what was the point of fighting any longer? Tang Jiao had left, and the spectating students were all at a loss for words. There were only 8 elites more powerful than Tang Jiao, yet none of them were present. They were either training outside or cultivating in seclusion. How could they be casually called over? Them being able to call Tang Jiao over was already a pleasant surprise. However, even Tang Jiao had been unable to defeat Ling Han. As such, there was nothing more the Eastern institution could do. Ling Han smiled at Jin Zhihui, and said, "Brother Jin, let's go." Jin Zhihui nodded, and replied, The two of them entered the main gates of the Eastern institution just like that. They swaggered through the Eastern institution as they walked toward the Northern institution. The students of the Eastern institution followed behind them, all of them seething with anger and clenching their fists. You two are really treating the Eastern institution as a shortcut. Jin Zhihui was baffled, and he asked, "Brother Ling, why do these people keep following us? Why was I targeted when I said that I wanted to visit you?" Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, "Brother Jin, you might not know, but this Scarlet Heaven Academy is actually divided into 4 major institutions." He told Jin Zhihui the reason for him being targeted, and this left the latter feeling extremely vexed. So it turned out that he had brought trouble onto himself. "Brother Jin, is this the sword that you forged?" Ling Han patted his shoulder and pointed toward the sword in his hand. Jin Zhihui's face instantly lit up, and he nodded profusely, saying, "That's right, this is the sword that I forged." The material of this sword is a piece of extraterrestrial meteoric metal, and the sword forge manor conducted a lot of tests after obtaining this metal. However, everyone concluded that this was only a level 1 godly metal. However, after investigating it for thousands of years, I reached the conclusion that this is definitely no ordinary level 1 godly metal. Indeed, it's only a level 1 godly metal in its current state. However, it's as if this piece of metal possesses life, and it even has the ability to grow. I investigated it for another tens of thousands of years, and all I was thinking about was how to maintain its growth ability after forging it into a sword. Moreover, I had to maintain the sword's shape and power. And now, I've finally succeeded. Chapter 1088, A Divine Sword That Could Grow. Ling Han was surprised. A divine sword that could grow? For cultivators, it was naturally best if they could obtain a high-grade god tool, which they could use for a very, very long time. The 9 Demons sword, for example, could instantly increase one's battle prowess endlessly. But the problem here was, a high-grade god tool would not be easily obtained just because one wanted it, and even if one managed to obtain one, would it be that easy to master? Even the Eternity Sky Emperor lost an arm trying to recover the 9 Demons sword, and that was still because the 9 Demons sword was originally an ancestral weapon of the Chang clan. If it had been another person in his place, even if it was Empress Luan Xing, she would have been unable to collect it. Hence, to settle the matter in one go, to directly wield a god tool till death was practically impossible. Unless there was an elite that used supreme secret techniques to refine and boost a weapon for their descendant day and night. Only then would it be possible that a mountain river tier cultivator could master a god tool of sun moon tier, or even heavenly body tier. However, there were really much too few such cases. Furthermore, this would very easily cause their descendant to become habitually reliant on their god tool, and would be disadvantageous to their personal growth. Ordinarily, cultivators would wield a weapon that corresponded with their own cultivation level, and use their martial intent to nurture it every single day. Over time, their weapon would naturally develop an ego and transform into a god tool. As for the majority of mountain river tier cultivators, they would need a few millennia just to advance a minor level, so they could use the same weapon for a few millennia as well. Hence, there was naturally no need to rush to change their weapon. Ling Han was different, though. His advancement through the cultivation levels was too fast. In 2 years' time, he had advanced into the high extreme of mountain river tier, so he could not possibly nurture any weapon into a god tool. If he had a divine sword that could grow, he could nurture it without worry. If he improved, so would his god tool. He would never have to worry about a day when his god tool would be washed out. Brother Jean, you are truly a genius. Ling Han expressed sincerely. This was definitely a mighty feat. However, Jean Zhihui did not accept Ling Han's compliment, and said, I have merely discovered the unique trait of this metal, then thought of a method to forge it so that this unique trait would be preserved. In this whole world, there only exists one such piece of this kind of godly metal, and I would not be able to forge a second sword like this one. The greatest divine sword in the world. Ling Han drew the sword out of his hilt. The coldness exuded by this sword was indeed not all that powerful, and it could only be considered an ordinary weapon. It could not even be considered to be a god tool. How should I improve it? He asked. Through battle. Using this sword to slice other weapons would allow it to swallow their essence, and thus allow it to grow. Jean Zhihui became excited again. Although he could only forge one such divine sword, it was possibly the pinnacle of his whole life of swordsmithing. Ling Han muttered, and said, which means, I cannot advance it by skipping levels, and directly use a level 2 or 3 godly metal for instant success. Indeed, you cannot. Jean Zhihui shook his head. You must proceed and progress steadily, just like how cultivators cultivate. Brother Jean, you are really trustworthy. It was obviously me that had obtained a supreme divine sword, yet I still had to trouble you to visit me personally to deliver it, Ling Han said apologetically. Jean Zhihui smiled, and replied, this is matter that I had promised you before, Brother Ling. Furthermore, Brother Ling saved my life once before, and is the only person who supported me. If I do not give this divine sword to you, I truly can find no other suitable. Then I shall speak no more pretentious words. Thank you, Ling Han said. Come. Let's have a drink. This is my first visit to Point Star City 1, and as the host, you have to entertain me well, Jin Zhihui said, smiling. Ling Han brought him to the pharmacy, and beckoned over the Rain Emperor and the others. Then, they ran off to the restaurant, where the whole group got truly plastered. After entertaining Jin Zhihui well for a few days, this maniac of swordsmithing returned to Swordforge Manor. Hi's whole heart was filled with swordsmithing. Although he no longer had the materials to forge a similar sword, he also had lofty aspirations to forge even more precious swords that shattered conventions. Meanwhile, Ling Han bought a great number of pieces of level 1 godly metal. Though Jin Zhihui's words were very amazing, he had truly never heard of this kind of metal that could grow by swallowing the essence of whatever it struck. Hence, he was naturally very curious. Within the Black Tower, Ling Han brandished the divine sword, and slashed out at the pieces of metal he had just purchased. Ding, 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 ding. The crisp sound of metal striking sounded out continuously. They were both level 1 godly metal, but the treasured sword had been tempered repetitively, so its toughness was naturally far above that of these pieces of godly metal that had not been tempered before. Thus, under Ling Han's brute force, these pieces of godly metal that had been bought naturally broke apart with a single slash. Ling Han discovered that in the process that the godly metal had been sliced in half, something indescribable had entered into the divine sword. This kind of change was extremely minute. If this had not been inside the Black Tower, which allowed him to strengthen his senses a few hundredfold, or even a few thousandfold, he could not have possibly sensed such a slight, minuscule change. Small Tower appeared, releasing a shocked exclamation. This luck of yours is really not all too bad, you actually obtained a piece of devouring metal. You know the material used to forge this sword? Ling Han was surprised. Small Tower was extremely proud, and said, of course. Ling Han sighed, and retorted, go on. Don't just stop halfway, do you want to be struck by lightning? Small Tower humphed, and then continued, the devouring metal is very unique. Its starting point is very low, and it could only be compared to level 1 godly metal. However, it has endless room for improvement. Some have said that it could possibly reach the height of divine metal. Divine metal. Ling Han's heart clenched. He had heard Small Tower speak of divine metal, which was a treasure that exceeded godly metal. Furthermore, divine metal could merely be divided into types, and there was no difference in grade. Every piece of divine metal was an ultimate treasure in itself. There was a chance that this could possibly become divine metal? Fuck, if Jin Zhihui had known this, would he regret the fact that he had presented this treasured sword as a gift? That was possible. Ling Han shook his head. For such a maniac about swordsmithing, being able to forge a treasured sword that could show its might in the whole world was his real dream. If this sword had stayed with him, it'd have practically been like casting a pearl before a swine. However, this is only in theory, Small Tower continued. To increase the grade of devouring metal, the amount of godly metal required would be an extremely huge number. Furthermore, the metal that it swallows in the process of advancing can only be of the same level as its current grade. This practically means that it could not possibly become a divine metal, because at the end, how could there possibly be so much level 20 godly metal in this world? True. Ling Han nodded. From level 5 godly metal onwards, there was pitifully little of the progressive levels. There was similarly little of level 9 godly metal, just like the numbers of heavenly body tier elites. Level 20 godly metal would definitely be as scarce as Genesis tier elites. Where would he find so many pieces of high-grade godly metal for this sword to devour so it could advance? He shook his hand again. This would be something for who knew how many years later, so there was no need to be so anxious and worried yet. Ling Han chopped, and chopped some more, using the treasured sword like a woodcutter's axe. He instilled his own martial intent into it to communicate with this sword. With the passage of time, this divine sword would naturally become capable of communication, and become a real god tool. After being chopped by the divine sword a great many times, those slabs of godly metal gradually lost their initial luster, just as if they had turned into scrap metal. True enough, the essence within had been swallowed, Ling Han mumbled to himself. This was actually a bit similar to cultivators. On the path of cultivation, wasn't it all about snatching away the essence of heaven and earth, and using such materials to strengthen oneself? Since this sword is going to be by my side for a very, very long time, I'll have to give it a name. And what name should I give it that would sound more overbearing? Chapter 1089, Death of a Great Star. Ling Han was obviously no expert at naming. Just look at the names he had come up with before. It was practically tragic. It is presently godly metal, and could possibly become divine metal in future, so I'll just name it the Divine Godly Sword. After Ling Han pondered for a while, he abruptly lost interest, and very carelessly came up with a name for this sword. However, wouldn't Divine Demon Sword sound even more awesome? Then we'll just go with Divine Demon Sword. Ling Han had absolutely no principles. In terms of coming up with names, he was really very bad at it. He chuckled as he continued to slash to his heart's content, causing the Divine Demon Sword to grow endlessly. With every slash of the sword, the Divine Demon Sword would experience a slight boost, but the pace of improvement was extremely slow. If it was really to complete a qualitative transformation from level 1 to level 2, a huge number of godly metal would be needed. Thankfully, level 1 godly metal is not really all that valuable for me now. So, I'll just burn money. Ling Han slashed for a total of 3 days and nights within the Black Tower. The godly metal that he had sliced into scrap was uncountable, and he had also exited once in this period of time to replenish his store of godly metal. Finally, after 3 days, the Divine Demon Sword experienced a qualitative change. It had advanced into the same level as level 2 godly metal. Ling Han discovered that in the process of this qualitative change, the Divine Demon Sword's accommodation for his martial intent also reached the pinnacle. In a short instant, he actually managed to brand 7 divine patterns within the sword. This caused Ling Han incredible surprise. It had to be known that using one's martial intent to leave behind a brand inside one's weapon, expressed through the form of divine patterns, was a very long process. After all, that was stimulation through one's willpower, and not origin power. Thus, nurturing a god tool would be a matter of a few decades or centuries at least. Yet, when the Divine Demon Sword was experiencing this qualitative change, it seemed to have turned into a piece of blank paper, allowing Ling Han to draw on it as he liked. Instantly, he had branded 7 divine patterns on it. How could this possibly not make Ling Han pleased? Now, the toughness of the sword's body has reached the level of level 2 godly metal, and the power of the Divine Demon Sword is comparable to a level 1 god tool. This meant that if he did not awaken the Divine Sword, and merely used its own power to strike, the Divine Demon Sword would only be an ordinary level 2 godly weapon, and not a god tool. However, if he awakened the power of the Divine Demon Sword, it could allow it to unleash battle prowess of a level 1 god tool. I still have to continue improving so that it can be on the same level as my abilities. Otherwise, if it collided against a level 3, or level 4 god tool, it would very possibly snap in half, and he would have to seek out Jin Zhihui to repair it. If he recklessly joined the two halves together again, it could possibly ruin the unique trait of the devouring metal. If it had been easy, how could Jin Zhihui have gone to so much trouble and spent more than 10,000 years just to create this Divine Demon Sword? But I don't have any money left. I'm so poor. AI. Ling Han sighed. Previously, when he had bought level 1 godly metal, he had practically spent all his savings. Now, even though he still had a small number of true origin stones left, how many pieces of level 2 godly metal would he be able to purchase? No wonder Small Tower said that only theoretically was there a possibility that the devouring metal could complete a qualitative change into divine metal. By the end, he would probably have to find all the level 20 godly metal in the entire immortal realm, and only then would he be able to make the devouring metal complete the final leap. Oh, right. Couldn't the Black Tower also produce godly metal as well? The Black Tower could produce a piece of godly metal every year, just like how it could produce spirit stones. However, if this piece of godly metal was not taken out, its grade would improve by a certain amount every year, and this caused Ling Han to hesitate. That was because even 100 low-grade pieces of godly metal could not match a single piece of high-grade godly metal. Forget it. In any case, the amount of level 2 godly metal that I need would also be great, so I will not go with that idea, Ling Han thought. As a human, he had to set his sights further. Since I'm out of money, I will have to work hard at concocting alchemical pills. Ling Han decided to first slow down the advancement of his cultivation level. In any case, he had the reincarnation tree, with which a single day was comparable to spending a year in normal meditation. He also had the demonic power source seat, meant there was no need for him to consider the accumulation of origin power before the sun-moon tier, so he could indeed spend some time on alchemy. He worked hard at concocting as he waited for the majestic heavens sect to accept disciples. Shui Yenyu would frequently come to cultivate, and try to improve her cultivation level as far as possible, so she naturally had to borrow the spot at the reincarnation tree. Her target was very clear, and that was to be chosen by the majestic heavens sect so that she could stay with Ling Han. Otherwise, who knew how long it would be until she next saw this damn pervert. Furthermore, this guy's brightness could definitely not be concealed wherever he went, so she would have to keep him in her sight to avoid any other woman taking advantage of her absence. However, her talent in martial arts was not all that high, and her tier-surpassing battle prowess was merely 2 stars as well. In the Scarlet Heaven Academy, that was considered very awesome, but the disciples that the majestic heavens sect took in were definitely the cream of the crop from every great planet, and 2 stars won were definitely not enough. Thus, if she wanted to enter into the majestic heavens sect, she would have to depend on something else. Her age and cultivation level. Mountain River tier cultivators were definitely not rare in the majestic heavens sect. However, what about a cultivator who was in the high extreme in Mountain River tier, or even consummate level, yet below 40 years old? Then, even if she did not have much tier-surpassing battle prowess, she could fall into the category of top geniuses. My ability of surpassing my tier in battle prowess was not as strong as yours, but my rate of cultivation was faster than yours, and my cultivation level was superior to yours as well, so I could still dominate you. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh loudly as he grabbed this captivating, seductive beauty with a move, and said, "Wife, your regard has touched me very much. Come, give me a kiss." Shui Yenyu rolled her eyes at him, and said in annoyance, "I only want to enter the majestic heavens sect to improve, so what relation has that with you?" This woman was really easily embarrassed. Ling Han chuckled, and said, "Wife, my wife, this part of you is the only bad thing about you. You continue to be unwilling to admit that you have been conquered by my charms. But that's all right. I like slowly teaching you, and enjoy this process." "Ah," Shui Yenyu exclaimed in surprise. This guy was again groping her all over, and without doubt, the place he occupied was naturally her 2 breasts. She was both embarrassed and irritated as she exclaimed, "Damn pervert, don't be like this." "Don't be like what?" Ling Han snickered. In truth, Shui Yenyu's asterisk was also filled with beauty. The angle of her fullness caused his desire to be incited greatly, and he couldn't help but stretch out his hands as he kneaded them to a different shape continuously. A terrifying shock wave rolled over them, causing the couple to simultaneously pause, and they raised their heads to look at the sky. The bright moon was in the middle of the sky, but a great star suddenly appeared amidst all the brightly shining stars. It was releasing an incredibly majestic light. No, it was more akin to a fountain that was spewing out brilliant light, brightening the whole sky. Boom! Another powerful feeling of lingering fear was felt. For some reason, the couple was sure that it had to have been caused by that great star, and related to the light that it was currently spewing out. What star is this? Could it be that it has come to the end of its natural lifespan, and is about to release its last brilliance? The immortal realm was completely different from a small world. A small world only had a large mainland, and the stars in the sky were actually multiple meteors, which elites could easily cause to fall. In the immortal realm, however, every star was a great star one, or could even be a sun, burning with divine flame. It could burn elites of heavenly body tier to nothing, and even great elites of eternal river tier would not dare to barge onto them. Every great star had its own lifespan, but it was as long as a few dozen 100 million, or even billions of years. It was difficult for even elites of the heavenly body tier to see a great star come to the end of its lifespan. It was only known that when a great star finally died, there would be a huge explosion. It was extremely terrifying. Just imagine how many cultivators could be cultivated by a great star, yet this power would be set off in the short time of a few breaths. Probably even heavenly body tier cultivators would be insta-killed. This was power that could be world-destroying, and only Genesis tier elites would be able to contend against power of such astronomical level. Now, a great star in the sky suddenly shone brilliantly, so it was very possible that it had come to the end of its life. Chapter 1090, Large Tomb Among the Stars. Wait, no. Shui Yenyu shook her head, and said, there shouldn't be any stars at that location. Ling Han was a bit unsure, and he asked, are you certain? Shui Yenyu nodded her head seriously, and said, I'm certain. Her talent in cultivation was indeed far below that of Ling Han. However, she liked to read all kinds of books, so in terms of knowledge, she definitely knew far more than Ling Han. How strange. Then what on earth is that thing? Both of them looked at the sky where the large star continued to emit a dazzling radiance. Waves of energy fluctuated toward every corner of space. Such fluctuations were powerful enough to affect all beings in the nearby galaxies. The next day, everyone was discussing the large star that had appeared the previous night. This was a truly astonishing event. Generally speaking, stars couldn't be seen in the morning. This was because the light from the sun was far too bright and dazzling. Now, however, that large star could still be seen. The light that radiated from it didn't seem bright at all, yet it was somehow able to shine through the brilliant radiance of the sun. Everyone was engaged in spirited conversations, curious as to where this large star had come from. They had never seen a star in that location before, and it was as if this large star had suddenly appeared out of thin air. A large star could appear out of thin air? This was absolutely unfathomable. Numerous forces instantly sent starships into the vast universe, wanting to investigate the large star from a closer distance. Starships were different from warships. These were transport tools specifically used to travel around the universe. The materials that they were made from an energy source that they used were all of far higher quality than those of warships. After all, warships were fine as long as they could fly. If warships were something that could be made by any force willing to grit their teeth and use some resources, then starships were something that only belonged to truly powerful forces. This was because they were extremely expensive, both in terms of construction and in terms of maintenance. In any case, who would travel into the universe for no reason? If one wanted to travel from one large star to another large star, the travel time could easily extend into years. If the stars were further apart, this time could even blow out to hundreds or perhaps even thousands of years. Few people were willing to stay in the boring and lonely universe for so long. Only a mere few days had passed, yet a starship had already returned with an important piece of news. No, it was more accurate to describe this as a stunning piece of news. That large star was actually a tomb. What? Ling Han was, of course, shocked upon hearing about this. A tomb had actually appeared among the stars. This was already an extremely uncanny situation to begin with. However, what was more surprising was the fact that they could see this tomb from so far away. Just how large was this tomb? Even if a mountain were tossed into the universe, one would be unable to see it after traveling suitably far away. Even Ling Han, with his eye of truth, wouldn't be able to see it. So, just how large was this tomb? Ling Han couldn't help but feel curious. He suddenly wanted to head over and have a look for himself. Ling Han wasn't the only one who felt like this, with even the Majestic Heavens sect sending out a notice about pushing the sect entry exam back by an indefinite amount of time. They were going to send a team to explore that large tomb first. All of the forces treated this matter with extreme seriousness, and those that owned starships were already bustling around and preparing to head over for exploration. This large tomb among the stars was a gigantic treasure trove no matter how one looked at it. However, only a few super-powerful forces owned starships. Would ordinary people have the right to catch a free ride? Of course not. However, it wasn't only the heavenly body tier forces that owned starships. Traveling merchants also owned starships. Some merchants did interplanetary business, meaning that they had to travel back and forth between planets in order to deliver resources and purchase specialty products. There were huge profits to be made from these businesses, of course. As mentioned before, traveling between planets consumed an exorbitant amount of time, and there was also a possibility that one would come across unpredictable space storms. Such storms would bury their victims in the dark universe, never to return home again. Merchants were especially good at seizing opportunities, and they immediately opened a new route to ship people to the large tomb. However, this required the purchase of a ticket, each costing a whopping 10,000 true origin stones. This was dear enough to scare most people off. Even so, demand for these tickets was still greater than the supply. They were sold out in an instant. One had to realize that even the Empress, the 7 generals, and the left and right ministers were actively preparing to enter the large tomb. This highlighted just how astonishing the opportunities on the large tomb were. Ling Han managed to purchase 2 tickets, one for himself, and one for Shui Yenyu. Of course, he would also bring the Rain Emperor and the others over. However, they would all have to stay in the Black Tower first. Once Ling Han arrived at the large tomb, he would decide what to do according to the situation there. Numerous starships soared through the sky. It wasn't only the chaotic star's majestic empire that was active, with the super forces of the other 2 majestic empires also joining in on the expedition. Of course, these majestic empires would still leave some elites to guard their land, just like how the chaotic star's majestic empire had left the 9 kings. There were still a few days until Ling Han's starship set off, so he decided to pay Old Man Su a visit first. He had decided on this quite some time ago. However, his plans had been affected by Jin Zhihui's sudden visit. He had upgraded his divine demon sword after that, and then put all of his effort into refining pills. These all pushed his plan back. When he arrived at the library, it was already quiet, and not busy like normal. Most people had probably done everything in their abilities to get a ticket to the large tomb. Those who hadn't left yet were probably preparing to leave. As such, who had the time to visit the library? Senior. Ling Han walked over and respectfully greeted Old Man Su. He owed this old man far too much. Which of the 7 kill subduing soul technique and universal 8 desolation technique wasn't a supreme secret technique? Even a master mightn't necessarily teach such secret techniques to their disciple. However, Old Man Su had taught him, and all he had asked for was a promise. Old Man Su was currently napping, and he opened his eyes upon hearing Ling Han's greeting. He turned around with a look of astonishment on his face, and said, "How is your cultivation speed so fast?" Although Ling Han didn't know how powerful Old Man Su was, he held a firm belief that his cultivation level was definitely profound. Thus, it didn't come as a surprise to him that Old Man Su could detect his cultivation level with a single glance. He chuckled, and said, "I came across some rare opportunities." Old Man Su didn't press him about what rare opportunities he had come across. His expression became serious, and he said, "Lad, don't focus all of your attention on improving your cultivation level. If you want to reach a profound height, you must ensure that each step you take is firm and unwavering. Don't be greedy and bite off more than you can chew, otherwise, you'll only end up ruining your own future." Faithful words grated upon the ears. Ling Han instantly became solemn, and he said, "Thank you for your reminder, Senior. I'll definitely keep your words in mind." Old Man Su nodded before smiling and saying, "Your foundation is strangely stable even though your cultivation speed is so unbelievably fast. Even I'm a little stumped. This wasn't all that surprising, as Ling Han had a reincarnation tree in his black tower. Comprehending Tao for a day with it was equivalent to comprehending Tao for a year, so how could his cultivation level not be stable? Ling Han simply smiled. Him being grateful toward Old Man Su was one thing, but him revealing all his secrets was another. In reality, he knew almost nothing about Old Man Su, so how could he reveal the secrets of his black tower and his reincarnation tree? Since your cultivation speed is so fast, this old man will also remind you earlier lest you find out too late, Old Man Su said. Remind me about what? Old Man Su didn't answer, instead asking, in your opinion, what's the maximum number of stars a cultivator can surpass? Is this even a question? 4-star geniuses are already incredibly rare, and 5-star geniuses only exist in legends. This is a widely acknowledged fact. However, Ling Han knew that his battle prowess was definitely above 5 stars. Right now, just his power alone could already surpass 5 stars. If he unleashed all of his other abilities, even surpassing 7 stars was no problem at all. Chapter 1091, 10-Star Genius. Senior, there are preconditions regarding how many stars one can surpass. Ling Han thought for a moment, before continuing, take me, for example. If I meet someone who's 9 stars above me, let's call them Person A. Person A hasn't practiced any techniques to defend against divine sense attacks. Thus, if I use the 7-kill subduing soul technique to attack Person A and suppress their battle prowess, my chance of defeating them is at least 50%. In such a case, I would have the ability to surpass 9 stars. However, if I meet another person, let's call them Person B, and their battle prowess is only 8 stars above mine, it's still extremely likely that I'll lose if there's someone who has practiced techniques to defend against divine sense attacks. In such a case, I wouldn't even have the ability to surpass 8 stars. However, if Person B hasn't practiced divine sense attacks, they'll naturally be unable to defeat Person A. This leads to a strange cycle. I can defeat Person A can defeat Person B, and Person B can defeat me. As such, I really don't know how to rate my battle prowess. Old Man Su laughed heartily, and said, very well indeed. You're already able to consider such kinds of scenarios. Just like how the Shattering Void tier is determined by power, the battle prowess of the immortal levels is also built upon power. After all, power is the absolute fundamental. When talking about star-surpassing geniuses, power is the measurement that's used, not battle prowess. Of course, having more power doesn't necessarily guarantee victory. There's nothing surprising about this. Thus, when talking about star-surpassing geniuses, we're simply measuring one's battle prowess from the perspective of their power. In any case, power is the most important attribute. Without power, everything else is useless. Ling Han nodded in agreement. If 2 people possessed the same power, yet they practiced different secret techniques of varying might, it was only natural that there would be significant differences in their strength. This had nothing to do with whether one was a genius or not, nor did it have anything to do with how much effort one exerted. Rather, it had everything to do with the secret techniques and cultivation techniques that one practiced. By this measure, Ling Han was a 5-star genius. However, this wasn't his limit. He noticed that his power was still growing at a rate that exceeded his cultivation level, and there was a possibility that it had reached 6 stars. When you were at the Shattering Void tier, you attained a power of 20 stars, Old Man Su said. This means that you reached a level of perfection in the previous tier. Otherwise, there's no way you could have reached 20 stars of the Shattering Void tier. However, if you cultivate to the peak stage of the consummate level of the Mountain River tier just like this, your power will only be able to surpass 6 stars at most. 6 stars, was this not impressive enough? 5-star geniuses only existed in legends. In fact, there was a possibility that such legendary geniuses relied on secret techniques, and were unable to reach such a height with their own abilities. Lad, the vast nature of the universe is beyond your wildest imaginations. In the immortal realm, prodigies are nothing rare. Old Man Su shook his head, and continued, when I was young, I once traveled far and wide, and witnessed countless prodigies. Only then did I realize that I had been watching the sky from a well. Ling Han nodded, and said, Please enlighten me, senior. A satisfied smile appeared on Old Man Su's face. This young man was neither arrogant nor impatient. It was no wonder that his cultivation was so fast and outstanding. A look of reminiscence flashed across his face, and it was a long time before he said, The limit of cultivation should be 10 stars. Pooh! Ling Han almost choked. 5-star geniuses were already the things of legends, yet he was being told that the limit was actually 10 stars. Moreover, the 10 stars that Old Man Su spoke of was definitely in terms of power alone, and not the result of practicing secret techniques. Was this possible? 10 stars? He was already freakish enough, having cultivated each of his cultivation levels to a perfect state. However, just as Old Man Su had said, he could only reach 6 stars at most. This was only a tad more than halfway to 10 stars. If you want to challenge cultivators a major tier above you, then you must become a 10-star genius. Old Man Su spoke unhurriedly, and continued, This is a gulf that even 9-star geniuses can only look up to. Even if you're a 9-star genius at the peak stage of the consummate level of the Mountain River tier, you can only lower your head before those at the early stage of the low extreme of the Sun Moon tier. Ling Han couldn't help but feel fervent with excitement. He had never heard of a Mountain River tier cultivator defeating a Sun Moon tier cultivator before. However, if he could become a 10-star genius, he would be able to make the impossible possible. Of course, this came with a condition: one had to be at the peak stage of the consummate level of the Mountain River tier, and their opponent had to be at the low extreme of the Sun Moon tier. Otherwise, it would be futile even if one were a 10-star genius. Ling Han was slightly confused, and he said, But senior, you said that I've already reached a level of perfection in each of my cultivation levels. Even so, I can only reach a power of 6 stars. Wasn't this an impossible task? Old Man Su laughed heartily, and said, Young lad, have a little more patience. He stood up, and said, Follow this old man for a walk. The two of them entered the dense forests by the lake again, and Old Man Su said, The so-called consummate level of the Mountain River tier is not actually the consummate level. Ling Han was instantly startled. Not the consummate level? The true pinnacle of the Mountain River tier is 5 mountains and rivers, not 4. Old Man Su finally revealed an astounding secret. Ling Han's mouth gaped open in shock. It was a publicly acknowledged fact that the Mountain River tier had 4 minor tiers. Everyone cultivated according to this paradigm, and they would start to form their sun and moon after cultivating 4 mountains and rivers. In other words, they would begin their breakthrough to the next cultivation level. Just then, however, he had been told that one could actually form 5 mountains and rivers. Then was it possible to form 6, or even 7, mountains and rivers? 5 is the genuine pinnacle of the Mountain River tier. It's impossible to form any more mountains and rivers. Old Man Su shook his head, and continued, This is equivalent to advancing an extra minor tier, and it's the only way to become a 10-star genius. Ling Han was puzzled again, and he asked, Then isn't there a void between 6 stars and 10 stars? Where did all the 7, 8, and 9-star geniuses go? Old Man Su laughed loudly, and said, Did you think that one would have certainly reached the pinnacle after forming 5 mountains and rivers? Some are only able to form the mountain, while others are able to form both mountain and river, yet cannot cultivate them to perfection. Thus, these people become 7, 8, and 9-star geniuses. So that's how it is. Ling Han faltered for a moment before asking, So, based on what you said, senior, can Sun-Moon tier cultivators also form 5 suns and moons? Can heavenly body tier cultivators also form 5 heavenly bodies? Then shouldn't there be 11 and 12-star geniuses? Brilliant question. Old Man Su chuckled, and said, However, you've gotten one thing wrong. He raised a finger, and said, One can only maintain a power of 10 stars if they reach the true pinnacle of each cultivation level. Otherwise, one's power will fall if they fail to reach the pinnacle for any one cultivation level. In such cases, they'll become 9, 8, or 7-star geniuses. Ling Han nodded in understanding. So, maintaining a power of 10 stars was actually this difficult. One had to reach the true pinnacle of each major tier. Senior, have you ever seen a 10-star genius before? Ling Han asked. A ferocious glint flashed past Old Man Su's eyes, and even his face shuddered a little. He only regained his composure after a long while, saying, I've never seen one with my own eyes. However, I've heard about a few supreme prodigies who are genuinely invincible in their own cultivation level. These supreme prodigies are called young king tier cultivators. Ling Han was astonished. Not only did such cultivators exist, but there were even a few of them. How was this possible? One had to realize that it was necessary to receive the blessing of heaven and earth should one want to attain a power of 20 stars of the Shattering Void tier. Otherwise, one would only be able to reach 17 stars. The remaining 3 stars were on another level altogether. Old Man Su noticed his confusion. With a smile, he said, Do you think it's hard for great elites in the immortal realm to send their clan members into small worlds to open the sky? Chapter 1092, Blurry Tombstone. Ah! Ling Han's body shuddered violently. Indeed, that was completely possible. One could open the sky and re-enter the immortal realm, thereby gaining the last 3 stars of power and reaching a perfect state of humanity. Ling Han couldn't help but sigh. These people truly had good fathers. Otherwise, they would have already lost at the starting line. I'm telling you this because I don't want you to advance too greedily. If you want to become a king tier cultivator, you must reach a level of perfection for each cultivation level. Otherwise, others at the same cultivation level will have an inherent advantage over you should their power be stronger than yours. Moreover, in terms of god tools and rare treasures, how can you compete against descendants of Eternal River tier and Genesis tier elites? Ling Han nodded in agreement. In terms of resources, he was definitely no match for the descendants of elites. That being the case, he could only strive to improve and aim to reach the true pinnacle for each of the cultivation levels. Thank you for your advice, Senior, he said sincerely. If it weren't for Old Man Su's advice, he would have definitely started to break through to the next major tier after reaching the consummate level. As such, he would only be a 6-star genius. Even if he were to reach the pinnacle of the following major tier, he would still only be a 9-star genius at most, though would never have the chance to become a 10-star genius. Old Man Su nodded in acknowledgement, and said, Farewell. It appeared as if he had said everything that he wanted to, and had no interest in speaking any longer. Then I'll visit you again later. Ling Han bowed respectfully before turning around to leave. Although Old Man Su had only told him some secrets, these secrets were hugely important to his future. The gulf between a 6-star genius and a 10-star genius was tremendous. To most prodigies, however, knowing or not knowing this secret was of no significance at all. This was because reaching the pinnacle of each cultivation level was far too difficult. Moreover, if one hadn't reached the pinnacle of humanity, it would be impossible for them to reach 10 stars even if they formed 5 mountains and rivers and 5 suns and moons. Reaching 10 stars required one to attain perfection in each and every cultivation level. Even a small step down from perfection would drop one to 9 stars. Ling Han believed that the Rain Emperor had the potential to become a 9-star genius. Feng Peyun was slightly less talented, and could perhaps become an 8-star genius. Meanwhile, Murong Qing mightn't even be able to form 5 mountains and rivers, nor 5 suns and moons. He had only reached a power of 17 stars of the Shattering Void tier anyway, so his potential was most likely limited to 4 stars. The gap between prodigies hadn't shrunk after they arrived in the immortal realm. Rather, it had grown. 3 days passed, and Ling Han and Shui Yenyu finally boarded their starship. They were about to depart at any moment. The starship was huge, truly huge. Warships could be built in a small size, much like the cloud-piercing shuttle, which could only seat 2 people. However, starships were at least as big as half of a city. Otherwise, it would be impossible to engrave the humongous formations that were necessary to travel through the galaxy. If such formations didn't exist, how would they defend against meteoroids or other space dangers? When these formations were activated, they could even block the attacks of great elites at the heavenly body tier for a while. This would give the starship enough time to escape. However, even though the starship was so gigantic, it was still brimming with people right now. It wasn't long before the starship soared into the air and flew into the galaxy. Of course, starships also came in varying qualities. In terms of performance, this merchant starship was only so-so. The starship that had left before them had made a return trip in a mere 5 days. However, the starship that Ling Han was on still hadn't neared the large tomb after 5 days of flight. It took another 2 days before they finally arrived near the large tomb. Meanwhile, the nearby space was already fully docked with starships. Ling Han and Shui Yenyu walked to the deck to observe their surroundings. There were defensive formations enveloping their starship, producing a light gravitational field to mimic the natural environment of their planets. The only difference was that there was no breathable air. Fortunately, breathing wasn't necessary after one reached the immortal level. If someone who wasn't at the immortal level came over, they would simply be seeking death. A gigantic hemisphere lay before them. Great stars were all spherical, yet the gigantic body before them looked like a star that had been sliced apart, with only half of its body remaining. As such, it looked much like a tomb. Moreover, the city-sized starship was only like a mere ant before this ginormous tomb. There was absolutely no comparison. "It's not light that's being emitted, it's life essence," someone shouted in astonishment. The people on the starship were all astounded. How valuable was life essence? It was life essence that determined how long one could live. However, life essence could only be produced by oneself. Even if one were to snatch another being's life essence, they would only be able to benefit their own cultivation. It would be impossible to raise the amount of their own life essence. When one's life essence ran out, they would die. This was nature itself. Right now, however, this large tomb was spitting out a limitless amount of life essence. How could they not be stunned? If it were possible to cultivate atop this large tomb, the effects would definitely be jaw-dropping. However, this was a tomb, so shouldn't it have been lifeless and spiritless? Why was it exuding such astonishing amounts of life essence? This made absolutely no sense. A large tomb mysteriously appeared in the galaxy. Does this make any sense? This was genuinely a large tomb. There was even a tombstone on top of it. The tomb was already ginormous, so the tombstone was naturally of a shockingly large size as well. Stone slabs were a common sight, but since when had there been such a gigantic singular piece of stone? This tombstone was taller and larger than any mountain that they had seen. No one could see any cut marks on the stone. Meanwhile, there were only 2 extremely blurry words engraved into the tombstone. No one could read them, however. Who was mighty enough to build such a large tomb in the Galaxy 1? This had probably been a planet before, right? It had been forcefully refined into a large tomb to bury someone. Hang on, why can't I remember those 2 words? Someone yelped in surprise. They had clearly seen the 2 words on the tombstone before, even though they were blurry and incomprehensible. However, the person had instantly forgotten the image of the 2 words after turning around. This was far too uncanny. I can't remember them either. It seems like there's some mysterious force erasing these words from our memory. Everyone was astonished and excited. Just the tombstone alone was already so mysterious. That being the case, how many treasures did the tomb contain? The large tomb was mighty and magnificent, exuding an aura of life essence from its body. Meanwhile, there was an entrance that was enveloped in a fog of chaos on its front side. It was as if heaven and earth one had just come into being there. No one was able to see through the fog. No wonder the Empress and even the majestic Heaven sect were startled into action. This large tomb is far too mysterious and surprising. Some people tried to ascend the large tomb, yet apart from the entrance on the front side, descending toward other places would only lead to one fate exploding into bits. Some heavenly body tier elite activated their treasure and attempted to near the tomb, yet their treasure was directly blown into smithereens. That elite also had half of their body blown off, yet they luckily managed to survive. This rendered the other elite speechless. By the looks of it, forcing their way in would be impossible. Perhaps Venerable Trinity could try, but he was always in the majestic heaven sect. In fact, he had never left the sect before. However, it wasn't easy to enter via the main entrance either. The fog of chaos enveloping it was as heavy as a star, and one's bones would instantly creak and groan upon coming under its pressure. If one took a few more steps, they would definitely be flattened into a pancake. What could they do? Everyone knew that this large tomb was filled with opportunities. Perhaps it was the tomb of an Eternal River tier elite, or perhaps it was the tomb of a Genesis tier elite. If they could obtain the treasures of this supreme being, hee. However, no one could enter the tomb right now. Thus, what did it matter that the tomb was filled with treasures? That fog of chaos is dissipating, a powerful figure said. It was a heavenly body tier elite of the older generation. He had come from the domineering sun planet, and was already more than 30 million years old. His life was nearing its end, and thus he had come here prepared to die at any moment. If he couldn't find an opportunity to break through to the Eternal River tier, he would be halfway through death's door. Meanwhile, the fog of chaos was slowly dissipating, just as he had said. The large tomb was about to open. Chapter 1093, Entering the Large Tomb. It was almost impossible to cultivate in space, as no spiritual chi existed there. One could only replenish their power through true origin stones. Alchemical pills would also work, though this was much more luxurious. Ling Han was an exception. There were far too many people here, so no one would notice if a few people disappeared. Thus, he could enter his black tower and cultivate under the reincarnation tree whenever he wanted. The Rain Emperor and the others were also cultivating under the reincarnation tree. They replenished their power using true origin stones, and they increased the speed of their cultivation by taking alchemical pills. Thanks to the existence of the reincarnation tree, they didn't need to worry about this affecting their growth either. Ling Han focused on refining pills. He could only purchase godly metal if he had enough money, and he could only raise the level of his divine demon sword if he had enough godly metal. Not having enough money seemed like an eternal problem. However, even though he wasn't cultivating, his progress was the quickest out of everyone. There was nothing surprising about this. After all, he had a wisp of a demon master's essence in his body. This continually provided him with an essence power, causing his cultivation to progress even when he was sleeping. As long as he spent some time comprehending Tao under the reincarnation tree every day, his cultivation level would be able to match his mind and comprehension. There wasn't any risk or danger. He would be able to reach the middle stage of the high extreme after another month or so. Time trickled, and the fog of chaos enveloping the main entrance gradually dissipated, revealing the entrance to an abyss. From afar, this entrance looked like a passageway. However, it was actually shockingly huge. It was like an ocean, and even starships would be able to navigate inside easily. It merely looked small due to the humongous size of the large tomb. The great elites conducted numerous experiments, attempting to navigate unmanned starships into the entrance. After several attempts, they finally managed to succeed. Instantly, the starships all headed toward the entrance. The city-sized starships were like ants crawling into a mug when they flew into the entrance. The disparity in size was simply astounding. Everyone was filled with anticipation. This was a tomb built among the stars, a tomb carved from a planet. What kind of supreme figure was buried in this tomb? Meanwhile, Ling Han sighed with emotion. So what if one was at the Genesis tier? They would still reach the end of their life one day. In the end, their greatness and might would eventually transform into dirt on the ground. Were there truly eternal beings in the world? The starship had already navigated through the entrance as he pondered this. The interior was pitch black, and only the light radiating from the starship illuminated a small region in the surroundings. He immediately felt a soft body leaning against him. It was none other than Shui Yenyu. Ling Han wrapped his arms around this seductive beauty, and said, "Don't worry, I'll look after you." Shui Yenyu nodded. In fact, she had rarely ever ventured out for training. Before such a magnificent and mighty structure, she couldn't help but feel incredibly small and insignificant. The starship continued forward, and after flying for a few more hours, it arrived before a continent. A continent appearing in a large tomb was extremely strange. However, this was possibly the tomb of a great elite, so was the existence of a continent really all that extraordinary? Great elites naturally had their own abilities. The starships that had arrived earlier had already docked in especially neat rows. Many people had already disembarked, and were currently exploring the continent. The surroundings were dimly lit in this place, though this was enough for immortal-level cultivators to see clearly. There's actually breathable air. Ling Han took a deep breath. Although he didn't need to breathe, breathing had already become a habit, so he would still breathe whenever he could. It wasn't necessary, yet it would make him feel much more comfortable. "Be careful." Shui Yenyu nudged him and signaled toward a starship that had just passed. There was a flag flying above the starship, and there was a clear Zhao written on the flag. This was Great General Zhao's starship, and Zhao Luan had just disembarked. He was walking behind a tall and slim male, and his expression was incredibly respectful. Huh? Wasn't this great general severely wounded? Why is he heading out so soon? It seems that this large tomb is far too tempting. Even the recuperating great general Zhao couldn't resist its attraction. Ling Han nodded in acknowledgement. Zhao Luan would be even more brazen here, and if they came across each other alone, he didn't believe that Great General Zhao would give him any face. He had humiliated Zhao Luan several times, after all, and Zhao Luan was even the only child of Great General Zhao. It would be strange if the latter wasn't ticked off. The starship docked, and everyone disembarked with enthusiasm. However, the starship instantly turned around to return after everyone had disembarked. Heavens knew how many more people on the joint peace planet were still waiting to come over. Thus, it was only natural that the starship would try to make a few more round trips, making a huge profit in the process. Moreover, they didn't sell return tickets, but rather one-way tickets. If one wanted to return to the joint peace planet, then thank you, please continue to pay. Ling Han determined his bearings, yet direction was of little use in this place. Everything was relative. The spiritual qi here is extremely thin, so it's completely unsuitable for cultivation. However, this place is also swarming with life essence, so it can also be said that it's a holy land for cultivation. How strange, Ling Han said. Where should we go? Shui Yenyu asked. Let's head to a place with no one first so we can let Big Brother and the others out. Ling Han looked around. Many people had come here, yet due to the huge size of this continent, it seemed like there was only an insignificant amount of people. The two of them continued forward. Ling Han was just about to let Feng Peyun and the others out, yet he suddenly frowned and looked behind. You people have followed us for quite some time. Ling Han said calmly. 4 men had appeared behind them at some point in time. They looked to be around 30 years old, and they were all at the consummate level of the mountain river tier. However, one's age couldn't be determined by their appearance after they advanced into the immortal level. Judging by vigorous vitality, however, they were indeed middle-aged men. They were probably around 20,000 years old. Brat, you can fuck off now. As for this beauty, hee. We'll make sure to look after her. The 4 men roared with laughter. Ling Han shook his head. Trash truly did exist everywhere. They had only just entered the large tomb, yet they had already come across 4 perverted bastards. You're still not fucking off? Holy sh*t. I had to hold myself back for several days on the ship. Now that there's such a beauty before me, how can I contain myself? Hee, third brother, you've never been able to fix this habit of yours. If you're truly desperate, you can take the back door of this brat. Otherwise, you're third in line, so won't your little buddy burst in lust when you see Big Brother and me enjoying ourselves? Fuck off. I'm not gay. The four men were wanton and unrestrained, their speech full of vulgarity and profanity. Ling Han and Shui Yenyu were only at the high extreme and medium extreme of the mountain river tier, respectively, so the four should have absolutely no trouble suppressing them. Big Brother, it seems like this brat wants to resist. Then kill him. This beauty is truly seductive. I can't contain myself any longer. The four men attacked together. They clearly had higher cultivation levels, yet they still insisted on ganging up on Ling Han. It was clear that they had already made a habit of this. Rules and whatnot were all troublesome. Disposing of their opponents as quickly as possible was the most important thing. Ling Han humphed, and drew his divine demon sword. Sword rays swept out as he charged toward the four men. Yeah. The four men all yelped in astonishment. They hadn't expected for Ling Han to be so powerful, and realized that he was a troublesome opponent once he launched an attack. However, he was only a little troublesome. After all, he was merely at the high extreme. Humph. Your cultivation levels are so much higher, yet you still want to attain victory by ganging up on him. Do you people know no shame? A voice that was filled with haughtiness traveled over, quickly followed by the appearance of a youth striding over. He had long green hair, and there was divine light flashing across his body. There were 10 or so youths following behind him, all of them wearing respectful expressions. It was clear that this green-haired youth was their leader. Chapter 1094, Young Master Wuque. Who are you? How dare you stick your nose in our matters? One of the men turned around to scold the green-haired youth. Insolence. How dare you speak to young Master Wuque like that? A young man who was holding a spear leaped out from the group of youths, and shouted, I'll send you on your way. He raised his spear to attack. The man instantly drew his saber to parry. Ding, ding, ding. After a few exchanges, his expression changed drastically. Although both of them were at the peak stage of the consummate level of the mountain river tier, his battle prowess was a lot weaker than that of his opponent. Thus, he was immediately forced onto his back foot. Meanwhile, his opponent's spear was especially deadly and brimming with killing intent. This made him feel the threat of death. So powerful, he thought to himself in astonishment. He frantically roared and started to fight as if his life depended on it. Bursts of divine light exuded from his body as he suddenly grew several times his original size, becoming a giant who stood 9 meters tall. Pooh! His palm was run through by the spear, yet not even a single drop of blood flowed out. It was as if he had no blood in his body. Moreover, it appeared as if he couldn't feel pain, either, and he swung his saber toward the spear-wielding youth with his other hand. The spear-wielding man couldn't help but be surprised. He hurriedly swiped his spear up, pushing his opponent back and dissolving the might of his attack. A look of realization appeared on his face, and he said, You didn't expand your body, but merely filled it up to make yourself look bigger. It's not a genuine extension of your body, and thus you were completely unaffected, and didn't even bleed after being struck by my spear. So what if you know? The man chuckled coldly, and said, My body is so large right now, so how are you going to hit my vital points? Do you know where my vital points are? I don't need to know where your vital points are. Against my chilly frost spear, your only option is death. Veins of divine patterns instantly lit up as the spear-wielding man activated his spear. Boundless amounts of frosty air surged into the surroundings, and it was as if the nearby land had been turned into an ice cave. The man's teeth couldn't help but clack. There was a stunned look in his eyes, and he yelped, Level 4 God Tool. It was clear that this spear-wielding man was subordinate to the green-haired youth, yet even an underling like him could possess a Level 4 God Tool. What kind of concept was this? This group of youths. Unbelievable. Their backgrounds were definitely astonishing. "It's all just a misunderstanding," another man chimed in, and said, "Since these two are your friends, please forgive us for our recklessness." The spear-wielding man looked toward the green-haired youth, who merely gave a cold smile before saying, "You still want to live after daring to offend this beauty?" The spear-wielding man instantly understood his intentions. He raised his spear and launched an attack toward the four men. He was extremely powerful right now, and under the might of the spear, the surroundings were transformed into a world of snow and ice. In fact, the might of his attack had already surpassed the peak stage of the consummate level of the mountain river tier. Coupled with his own battle prowess, it was as if there were two elites fighting alongside each other. Even though he was fighting against four people by himself, he still enjoyed a great advantage. By the looks of it, he would be able to dispose of those four men in a few more strikes. Ling Han couldn't help but nod. It was difficult for cultivators to attain a battle prowess of even 1 star. However, god tools were different. This was because elites could nurture such weapons, and then bestow them to their descendants. As such, their descendants could easily surpass 4 or even 5 stars. This made Ling Han's anticipation grow even stronger. Just how mighty would his divine demon sword be when it caught up to his cultivation level? It was comparable to divine metal, and it wasn't simply a weapon that could grow. Ah! It wasn't long before the four men were all killed. The spear-wielding man lowered his weapon and respectfully returned to his position behind the green-haired youth. This was an astonishing sight. One had to realize that the spear-wielding man possessed an incredible battle prowess, and could easily make a name for himself. However, he was acting like a lackey right now. The green-haired youth walked over and flashed a charismatic smile at Shui Yenyu, saying, "Milady, I'm sorry that you had to be frightened like that." Ling Han shook his head in his mind. By the looks of it, he had a new rival in love. This wife of his genuinely possessed an incredible charisma. People would try to strike a conversation with her wherever she went, and these people were all of high positions and statuses, no less. It had been Zhao Luan before, and it was this green-haired youth now. Moreover, his background was probably no weaker than that of Zhao Luan. Ling Han extended an arm to block the youth, saying, "Please say whatever you want to say. Just don't come too close." Insolence. The spear-wielding male leaped out and pointed his spear at Ling Han. "Chang's son, calm down." The green-haired youth smiled faintly and lightly pressed down on the spear of the male, saying, "I'm Xia Wuque, and I come from the domineering summer majestic empire of the great growth planet." The man who he had referred to as Chang's son immediately put his spear away, and respectfully said, "Please excuse me for my actions, young master." Xia Wuque simply waved his hands before turning to Ling Han and Shui Yenyu, and saying, "And you two are?" Ling Han. "This is my wife, Shui Yenyu," Ling Han said with a smile. Xia Wuque's expression involuntarily became dark. He had seen many beauties before, but this was the first that he had seen a seductive beauty as charming as Shui Yenyu. A feeling of admiration and a desire to possess her had arisen in his mind at first sight. Yet, she was already taken. He swept his gaze over Ling Han, a look of ridicule involuntarily appearing on his face. How could such a lowly person deserve such a jade-like beauty? He chuckled coldly. Anyone who wasn't blind would be able to determine who was better between him and Ling Han. He had full confidence in himself. He was the 67th son of the Emperor of the domineering Summer Majestic Empire. At the same time, he was also the youngest son. However, he was the Emperor's most outstanding child, having already reached the peak stage of the consummate level of the mountain river tier at a young age of 507. More importantly, he had been placed in a small world when he had been around 40 years old. There, he had successfully opened the sky and cultivated each cultivation level to perfection. He was full of ambition, and it was his aim to become the strongest prodigy in all of history. He smiled, and said, "Friends, the situation here is unknown, and it might be extremely dangerous. How about we team up and work with each other?" Shui Yenyu shook her head, and said, "We merely met by chance. There's no need." She naturally knew what was going on in his mind. However, her heart was already with Ling Han now, so she was naturally unwilling to cause any more troubles. The two of them were about to leave, yet the spear-wielding male instantly dashed over to block their path. Chang's son, what are you doing? Xia Wuque shouted coldly. The spear-wielding male hurriedly retreated and kneeled down on one knee, saying, I was too rash. Xia Wuque flashed a confident smile, and said, Miss Shui, we'll meet again. Shui Yanyu didn't reply. Meanwhile, Ling Han simply waved his hand, not even turning around to look. Young master. The spear-wielding male shuffled over, a puzzled look on his face. Young master clearly liked that woman, so why didn't he force her to stay? With his identity, status, and talent, what kind of woman won't throw herself at him? You don't understand. Xia Wuque said with a chuckle. There was a meaningful look on his face. Where was the fun in easily obtainable women? Was he short on beauties? However, a woman as charismatic as Shui Yanyu was like a fine wine that had to be savored slowly. Not only did he want her person, he more so wanted her heart. Thus, he couldn't act too rashly. We'll meet by chance again. He waved his hand, and said, follow them. Chapter 1095, Stone Statue Army. Ling Han and Shui Yanyu walked for a while, and after making sure that there was no one nearby, Ling Han waved his hand and let the Rain Emperor and others out of the Black Tower. However, he didn't let everyone out. Qin Yi, Zhu Wujiao, and his other followers remained in the Black Tower to cultivate. Their cultivation level was still too low, so there would be no benefits even if they came out. Thus, it was naturally better for them to place their focus on cultivation. Only 5 people left the Black Tower: Feng Peyun, the Rain Emperor, Mu Rongqing, Helian Tianyun, and Ding Ping. The Azura Demon Emperor was in the body of a puppet wolf right now, so he couldn't be counted as a person. Anyhow, he was a being from the netherworld to begin with, so he had never been a human anyway. So, this is the large tomb among the stars? The Rain Emperor and the others were all astounded. This place was completely different from their imagination, and seemed almost no different from the Joint Peace Planet. It was just that the spiritual chi here was thinner, though the life essence here was astonishingly abundant. Ling Han nodded, and said, this is the interior of the large tomb. Its size is indeed incredible. Hee, since we've arrived here, how about we each go our own way? There was a glimmer in the Rain Emperor's eyes, and there was a strong fighting spirit exuding from his body. Feng Peyun and Murong Qing both nodded in agreement. I say we travel together. That way, it's easier for us to look out for each other. Ling Han felt that this place was dangerous, and there were also far too many elites present. The Rain Emperor and the others had broken through to the immortal level, and they also possessed the ability to fight above their cultivation level. However, there was still a great number of people who could easily defeat or suppress them. Fourth brother, we're all more inclined toward nurturing ourselves through battle, Feng Peyun said with a smile. Cultivating in seclusion isn't the right path for us. Ling Han faltered for a moment, and then slowly nodded. His 3 brothers were all supreme prodigies, especially the Rain Emperor, who had once been a ruler. How could such people stay under the wings of others? They were all proud people, so they naturally had to walk their own path. Fine. When the time comes, we'll meet up at the exit. Ling Han wasn't a hesitant person either. Fourth brother, take care. Feng Peyun and the others said. They all headed off in their own directions. Huh? They've all run away that quickly? Helian Tianyun scratched his head, and said, since they've all gone, I won't stay here to ride your coattail either. Little Ling, till later. He also left in a different direction. Master, Ding Ping was also itching to head off on his own. Ling Han couldn't help but roll his eyes. You, break through to the immortal level first. When you succeed, I'll also allow you to train outside by yourself. Now, however, you can remain honest and stay by my side. Understood. Ding Ping instantly conceded. The three of them also chose a direction. This was an expanse of plains, and there wasn't a single notable landmark in the surroundings to help one discern their bearings. Thus, their aim was merely not to retrace their own path. This place was desolate, and there was no life on the plains. There were no rodents or rabbits, and there wasn't even grass or other plants. It appeared as if this was a barren land. This was especially strange. There was no spiritual chi here, but ordinary beings didn't need spiritual chi, no? In any case, the life essence here was shockingly abundant, so shouldn't this place have been thick with greenery and filled with animals? Why was it a desolate expanse of barren land? They continued forward for almost a day. Huh! Ling Han was the first to cry out in surprise. There was a sea of people before them, and it looked as if they were an army standing in formation. Just one row of the formation already had a few thousand people. If he cast his eyes over a few more rows, the amount of people would number in tens of thousands. Master, what's wrong? Ding Ping asked hurriedly. Ling Han activated his eye of truth, and the look of astonishment on his face became even more intense. This was because the sea of people before them actually wasn't consisting of people, but stone statues. Let's move faster, he shouted. Okay. Ding Ping hurriedly nodded. However, he was only at the shattering void tier, so how could his speed compare to Ling Han's and Shui Yinyu's? He was instantly kicked in the rear by an impatient Ling Han. Xiao! He flew toward the stone statues. Master, he wailed in anguish. Shui Yinyu rolled her eyes at Ling Han. If others had such a talented disciple, they would definitely treat him like a treasure. However, Ling Han was completely different, and he was always thinking of ways to torment his disciple. Anyhow, the speed of Ding Ping's cultivation was clear for all to see, and if Shui Yinyu didn't work harder, it was extremely likely that she would be surpassed by him. Ling Han laughed loudly, and he grabbed onto Shui Yinyu as he said, "Disciple, your master is merely testing your reaction speed. However, your performance has disappointed me greatly." Pung! Ding Ping fell headfirst into the ground, directly getting stuck in it. He pulled his head out, only to find that he had already landed before the large army. This gave him a fright, and he hurriedly put on a cautious expression. Only after a short while did he realize that these were actually just stone statues. Meanwhile, Ling Han and Shui Yinyu had already arrived. The Azura Demon Emperor followed closely behind them. Ling Han swept his gaze over the army, and said in surprise, "There are at least 1,000,000 stone statues in this stone statue formation. Are these grave goods one?" Shui Yinyu asked curiously. Although this formation of 1,000,000 stone statues was astonishing, the great elite who was buried here was at least at the Eternal River tier. That being the case, this formation of 1,000,000 stone statues appeared ordinary in comparison. Probably. There are 1,000,000 people to accompany him, so he won't be lonely in the afterlife. Ling Han shook his head, and continued, "Alas, even invincible elites can't escape death. Is there truly no one who can remain undying for all eternity?" Although the lifespan of Genesis tier cultivators was incredibly long, there was still a limit, after all. They could only live for a maximum of 4 billion years. This was a terrifyingly large number, yet it was nothing compared to eternity. There would eventually come a day where everything was laid to rest. Huh! There's a stone tablet here. They walked left for a while, only to find a stone tablet that measured 9 meters tall standing before the stone statue formation. There were words engraved on the stone tablet. These were not blurry, unlike the ones at the main entrance. Instead, they were crisp and clear. Those who believe they are invincible can challenge this formation. Ling Han read. Should we walk around or challenge the formation? Shui Yinyu asked. Heavens knew what this stone statue formation was. It was best not to put themselves in danger. Ling Han was just about to speak, yet he suddenly faltered, saying, "There's movement ahead." They all leaped up, only to see a group of people entering the stone statue formation from 300 meters to their left. Meanwhile, the stone statues that had been rigid and unmoving surprisingly started to move, launching attacks toward that group of people. Right now, those people were engaged in an intense battle. Puppets. Ling Han and Shui Yenyu cried in unison. They were quite familiar with these kinds of beings now. However, there had only been thousands of puppets on Earth's core island, most of which were only at the low extreme of the mountain river tier. Meanwhile, the puppets here were all at the early stage of the consummate level of the mountain river tier. They possessed a frightening battle prowess. The strength of the challengers wasn't great, and they were kicked out of the formation after a short while. They were all bruised and bloodied, with wounds covering their entire bodies. "Let's walk around," a person said. This suggestion was quickly accepted by the others, and they all started to walk around the stone statues. The stone statue formation was only around 1 kilometer wide, yet it was incredibly deep. Thus, it was entirely possible that the number of stone statues numbered over millions. The group of people involuntarily stole a few extra glances at Shui Yenyu when they passed by. It seemed like some of them wanted to cause trouble, yet after glancing back, these people frantically increased their speed and left. Ling Han looked back, only to see Xia Wuque and his followers casually walking over. The group of people from before were most likely scared off by Xia Wuque. Xia Wuque smiled faintly, and said, "Hee hee, we meet again. The fate between us is indeed strong." However, he was also a little puzzled. There had only been Ling Han and Shui Yenyu before, so why was there suddenly a cultivator at the Shattering Void tier and a puppet wolf with them? Chapter 1096, Challenging the Formation. Shui Yenyu was displeased in her mind. She detested such clingy people. However, Ling Han was present, so she naturally wouldn't say too much. She would let Ling Han deal with the matter. Ling Han chuckled, and said, "In order to avoid any further coincidences, please, you first." He gestured for Xia Wuque to enter the stone statue formation first. He had already seen the might of the formation, and each of the stone statues possessed a battle prowess at the consummate level of the mountain river tier. Although they were only at the early stage, their overwhelming numbers more than made up for it. It could be said that apart from Sun Moon tier elites, pretty much no one at the mountain river tier could successfully navigate out of the stone statue formation. There weren't just a few hundred or a few thousand stone statues, but at least millions. Who could stand up against such a tremendous number of these stone statues? The spear-wielding man immediately took a step forward to whisper a word of warning, saying, "Be careful, young master." They had arrived later than Ling Han, so they had only seen the group of disheveled people walking around the army of statues. Combining this with the scene before them, they could easily guess that the stone statues before them weren't ordinary. A confident look appeared on Xia Wuque's face. He was a prince of the domineering Summer Majestic Empire, and was a peerless prodigy who would rule over an era. He was the embodiment of invincibility in the same cultivation level, and as long as these stone statues hadn't reached the Sun Moon tier, there was nothing for him to be afraid of. Moreover, after glancing at the wounds suffered by the group of people before, he could determine that the battle prowess of these stone statues was far from reaching the Sun Moon tier. Believing in his own invincibility? He didn't simply believe Shi was an invincible being. He looked at Shui Yenyu, and said, "Miss Shui, how about I escort you through this formation?" It couldn't be more obvious that he was trying to steal her from Ling Han. "Heh, there's no need to trouble an outsider like you." Ling Han waved a hand, and said, "In any case, you mightn't even be able to make it through yourself. I suggest you don't brag too much." A look of annoyance flashed across Xia Wuque's face. He had naturally paid no attention to Ling Han. However, this ant had provoked him time and time again, and he was truly seeking death. Even so, he still had to maintain his princely demeanor before Shui Yenyu. "Then I'll navigate through it for Ms. Shui to see," he said calmly. He purposefully didn't mention Ling Han in order to show his disdain. He looked at the stone tablet and read, those who believe they are invincible can challenge this formation. Hee, as long as my opponent's cultivation levels are the same as mine, I am indeed invincible. He strode into the stone statue formation. After a few steps, the nearby stone statues all came to life, launching attacks towards Xia Wuque. Weaklings like you aren't worthy of being my opponent. Xia Wuque didn't attack. Instead, a terrifying aura surged from his body as he glared at the statues. Pang, pang, pang. The stone statues that had leaped over were instantly sent flying. Powerful, he was indeed very powerful. Ling Han nodded in his mind. He could also defeat opponents at the early stage of the consummate level, but he definitely couldn't send his opponents flying simply by relying on a burst of aura from his body. By the looks of it, Xia Wuque wasn't only at the peak stage of the consummate level. He potentially possessed a power of 4 or even 5 stars. This was the reason behind him being so powerful. Young Master is so great, the spear-wielding man and the others praised, their arms raised in excitement. They all followed behind, challenging the formation alongside Xia Wuque. However, even though they were all at the consummate level, the difference in their battle prowess was significant. For example, the spear-wielding man was extremely powerful, and was able to send a stone statue flying with each swipe of his spear. However, there were also those who were weaker, and they were instantly plunged into a perilous situation after being surrounded by a dozen or so stone statues. Xia Wuque didn't show any sign of wanting to head back to help. He simply clasped his hands behind his back as he continued forward, the air of his arrogance already soaring through the heavens. If I'm to be honest, this person is indeed very powerful, Ling Han said. He wasn't afraid of mistaking their battle prowess. After all, he could use the spear-wielding man as a comparison. This youth was very powerful, and he was able to send a stone statue flying with each of his strikes. However, after venturing deeper into the formation, he also showed signs of exertion. Meanwhile, Xia Wuque still hadn't launched an attack yet. It was just that the speed of his advance had become slightly slower. After all, releasing his aura to defeat enemies required more origin power than simply launching an attack. This was the price of showing off. His origin power was abundant, yet it couldn't stand being used so wastefully. Beads of sweat were already forming on his forehead. However, he hadn't even passed 1% of the stone statue formation yet. After walking forward for a short while, Xia Wuque couldn't rely solely on his aura anymore. He swept his hands outward, sending terrifying waves of power toward the stone statues, easily blasting them into the air. It appeared as if he were invincible. Ding Ping shuffled over, and asked quietly, "Master, can you defeat him?" Ling Han pondered for a moment before saying, "If there's a limit on the number of exchanges, then he wins. If there's no limit, then I win." If there were a limited number of exchanges and victory couldn't be decided, then victory would go to the person who had enjoyed the advantage. In such a case, the victor would definitely be Xia Wuque. His battle prowess surpassed his cultivation level by more than 4 stars, and he was more so 6 sub-minor levels above Ling Han. An advantage of 10 stars was no small deal. However, Ling Han also possessed a powerful physique and an incredible recovery ability, was the type of person who wouldn't die unless he were insta-killed. Thus, if they engaged in a drawn-out battle, Xia Wuque's stamina would eventually run out. As such, Ling Han would naturally emerge victorious. Of course, after learning of Ling Han's freakish physique, there was probably no one who would engage in a drawn-out battle with him. In such a case, it was more likely than not that the battle would end in a draw. Fortunately, his words weren't heard by the spear-wielding man. Otherwise, he would definitely mock them for being shameless and inflated. More people arrived behind them. Some took a detour around the statues, while others started to challenge the formation. Ling Han had been indifferent at the start, yet a look of surprise quickly appeared on his face. This was because those who arrived were all at the Mountain River tier. So be it if there were no Heavenly Body tier elites, they were extremely few in number, after all. However, it was quite strange that not a single Sun Moon tier elite had arrived here. Could it be that the crowds were unknowingly dispersed? No wonder there are only puppets at the mountain river tier in this formation. This is because this formation is for those at the mountain river tier to challenge. Otherwise, if a sun-moon tier elite came, this formation wouldn't be able to block them even if there were tens of millions of puppets. After all, how can such puppets block the steps of a sun-moon tier elite? This was an astounding ability. Everything had happened without their knowledge. Even though Ling Han noticed it now, he had only reached this conclusion after observing the events before him. In reality, he still couldn't sense anything out of the ordinary. An elite is an elite, after all. The things they've laid out are still so impressive, even countless years after their death. Many people challenged the stone statue formation, convinced that they were invincible. However, the large majority of them were knocked out after advancing only an extremely short distance. Fortunately, one didn't need to retreat from the path that they had advanced when they couldn't hang on against the stone statues any longer. The stone statue formation was only 1 kilometer wide, after all, and those who gave up could easily exit from the sides. However, the strange thing was that people could only exit from the 2 sides, not enter. Was this to prevent people from cheating? Ling Han was especially intrigued. He decided to challenge the formation. "You two take a detour around," he said to Shui Yenyu and Ding Ping. Then, he nodded to the Azura Demon Emperor. He was signaling for him to protect his wife and disciple. The Azura Demon Emperor hurriedly wagged his tail in understanding. "Be careful." Shui Yenyu clearly knew that Ling Han possessed the Black Tower, yet she still couldn't help but worry about him. "Remember not to be rash." "I know," Ling Han said with a smile. In reality, he wasn't scared at all. Following his breakthrough to the high extreme, the strength of his physique had already reached the level 4 godly metal. Thus, what did it matter even if he were attacked by hundreds upon thousands of puppets? They wouldn't be able to injure him at all. In any case, he was the nemesis of puppets. Ling Han confidently strode into the stone statue formation. Chapter 1097, 4 Tiers. Xiao. The stone statue next to Ling Han instantly awakened from its slumber, and threw its fist toward him. Ling Han also clenched his fists and responded with a punch. Pung! The stone statue instantly stumbled backward. Its power was nothing extraordinary, and it was at the early stage of the consummate level. However, Ling Han's power could surpass 5 stars now, so the might of his fist had already reached the late stage of the consummate level. Thus, he was naturally able to enjoy a crushing advantage. However, numerous other stone statues awakened, and started to attack Ling Han. Some leaped high into the air, while others barged toward Ling Han. Their attacks were all ruthless, and none of them held back. This was also the reason why Ling Han didn't let Shui Yenyu and Ding Ping challenge the formation. It was possible that they would be killed in one strike. Even if one was on the back foot and wanted to exit the formation, they would need to possess an incredibly strong battle prowess in order to do so. It wasn't as simple or as easy as retreating whenever one wanted to. There were blood, limbs, and even corpses in the stone statue formation. Ling Han saw a large number of super geniuses in the formation. In fact, some of them were no weaker than Xia Wuque, and they were able to defeat the stone statues using only a single hand. They appeared especially calm. Ling Han believed that the number of prodigies that had entered this large tomb far exceeded the number that he had seen so far. This was because not all prodigies traveled alone. Some brought a bunch of weaklings with them, and some traveled with their seniors. There were also some that traveled alone, though there were Sun-Moon tier guardians protecting them in secret. However, the Sun-Moon tier and Heavenly Body tier elites naturally wouldn't appear in this place. Perhaps there were stone statue formations corresponding to the Sun-Moon tier and Heavenly Body tier as well. However, prodigies at the Mountain River tier would have no opportunity to challenge them. They would merely be able to look on from the sidelines. Meanwhile, the prodigies were also fighting among themselves. When this expedition ended, it would naturally be time for the Majestic Heavens sect to recruit disciples. Perhaps many of the people here would become new disciples of the Majestic Heavens sect. In other words, they'd become competitors. Thus, the competition and conflict between them had already begun. Of course, Ling Han didn't attract the attention of anyone. Although he was advancing, he wasn't doing so leisurely. After all, his cultivation level was still too low. The competition between the prodigies attracted the attention of numerous people, all gathered by either side of the stone statue formation to spectate. They wanted to know how many people could successfully challenge the formation. If there were those who succeeded, they wanted to know who had come first. Now that they were being compared against each other, the prodigies naturally felt an even stronger fighting spirit. Of course, it wasn't only the young prodigies who were competitive. The mountain river tier cultivators of the older generation also joined in on this competition, unwilling to be outdone. There were a few of them who were indeed extremely powerful. Although they hadn't been able to reach the sun-moon tier yet, they had cultivated their cultivation level to an incredibly solid state, raising their battle prowess through all kinds of different methods. There were obviously no rules against using god tools in this formation, and Ling Han saw an elder activating a turtle shell that had dozens of divine patterns on its surface. It was radiating with light right now, and it helped him block countless attacks. Everyone was displaying their unique battle prowess. Some relied on their strength, while others relied on their god tools. Those who had nothing to rely on could only exit through the sides lest they were beaten to death. Wuque was still heading the pack, though the people behind were already closing in on him. However, no one overtook him. The pressure on the leader was the greatest. Thus, since they were still so far from the finish line, the prodigies all decided to follow behind someone else. They weren't in a hurry to overtake him. Wuque is leading the pack right now. Who's Wuque? He's a prince of the domineering Summer Majestic Empire, and he's also the #1 prodigy of the Great Growth Planet. It's rumored that the domineering Sun Emperor specially sent him to a small world so he could open the sky and receive the blessing of heaven and earth. He'll certainly become a heavenly body tier elite in the future, and it's even possible that he's a legendary 5-star genius. 5-star genius. TSK, TSK, TSK. No wonder he's leading everyone else. He'll definitely win. Who can compete against him? Moreover, the domineering Sun Emperor actually left a small world for him to open. What astonishing power! However, the other prodigies can't be underestimated either. Look at the person coming second now. She's Xiao Cece from the southern plentiful planet, and she's the princess of the Thousand Frost Majestic Empire. She's also a supreme prodigy who once went to a small world and opened the sky. Fuck. Having a good father makes life so much easier. The person in third is Su Jing, an excellent disciple of the Large Stream sect. His strength is also profound. The person in fourth is Duan, and he's also a powerful prodigy. These 4 people were the most eye-catching out of the young prodigies, displaying strength far above their peers. This was because they had opened the sky, allowing them to start at a higher level than everyone else. Even if they couldn't form 5 mountains and rivers, their power alone would still be able to surpass 6 stars. This was astonishing, and even Ling Han couldn't face these 4 people head-on. The 4 of them formed the first tier, with no one else being able to keep up with them. In fact, the distance between them and everyone else continued to increase. The second tier consisted of slightly inferior prodigies, with most of them being mountain river tier cultivators from the older generation. For example, the person who was using the turtle shell god tool to protect himself and push on forward was among them. This god tool attracted the envy of many. It was something that could remain intact after blocking so many attacks at the consummate level of the mountain river tier. Who wouldn't want to own it? The third tier consisted of prodigies who were, again, more inferior. Their battle prowess was around 3 stars, yet all of them were already at the peak stage of the consummate level of the mountain river tier. If they weren't at this cultivation level, they would have been defeated by the formation already. Then there was the 4th tier, where the prodigies possessed a battle prowess of 2 stars. They were also at the peak stage of the consummate level of the mountain river tier. The people behind them couldn't be regarded as a fifth tier, as they had only just entered the formation. Those who were too weak had already been swept out of the formation. Ling Han was in the fourth tier right now, and he wasn't in a hurry to advance. He walked slowly and steadily, using the puppets to polish his battle prowess. Like the Rain Emperor, Feng Peiyun, and the others, he was also someone who improved through battling. However, his cultivation level had advanced too quickly in recent times. Although his mental state was able to keep up, he was still lacking in real-life battle experience. Thus, this seemingly endless stone statue formation was a great opportunity for him to train. If one looked closely, they would realize that Ling Han wasn't simply advancing through the formation. Rather, each stone statue that he defeated was on the verge of crumbling. If it weren't for the unique power of the formation allowing these stone statues to recover rapidly, the stone statues that were blasted back by Ling Han would all have been completely destroyed. After advancing some unknown distance, Ling Han suddenly realized that there was an indescribable power contained within the punches of the stone statues. When their fists struck his body, he actually felt a slight pain. One had to realize that Ling Han's physique was on par with level 4 godly metal. How could power at the early stage of the consummate level cause him pain? Inconceivable. Ling Han carefully observed their attacks, and he realized that a divine pattern had appeared on the fists of the stone statues at some unknown point in time. By the looks of it, it was this divine pattern that caused their attacks to become more vicious. The stone statues' power clearly hadn't increased, yet the threat that they posed became much higher than before. Pang, 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 pang. Intense battles raged throughout the formation. Agonized wails sounded from the latter 3 tiers as some of the prodigies were beaten beyond recognition. Many were unable to continue, and they hurriedly charged toward the sides. However, there were those who succeeded, and there were also those who were knocked down by a flurry of fists, never to get up again. These people became unidentifiable corpses on the ground. Only now did everyone realize that the might of the stone statue formation had increased. Chapter 1098, Fast and Slow. The spectators on the 2 sides were all pale with shock. They've only walked 1/10 of the distance, yet the might of the puppets has already increased. How can they possibly make it to the end? Yeah. It might become even stronger after a while. Isn't this almost impossible? Everyone shook their heads, thinking this formation was impossible to pass. The 4 tiers of prodigies continued to advance. The 4th tier originally had the most people, but it rapidly decreased in size as they entered what was speculated to be the second segment of the formation. After a while, they became one of the tiers with the least people, with only a few more members than the 4 people in the first tier. Everyone was astonished. As the large majority of the 4th tier was eliminated, the few remaining people all became especially eye-catching. Thus, Ling Han immediately attracted a lot of attention. I can't believe it. There's actually someone at the high extreme of the mountain river tier. By the looks of it, he still hasn't formed his 3rd river yet. It's clear that he still hasn't reached the late stage of the high extreme. Yet he's still able to make it so far? This doesn't make any sense at all. Is he a freak? He's probably got some treasure that can protect him from injuries. Everyone nodded in agreement. If this weren't the case, there would be no way that Ling Han could have advanced so far, even if he were a supreme prodigy. His cultivation level was too low, after all, and the attacks from the stone statues were relentless and ruthless. It was as if they would never stop attacking. How could a cultivator at the high extreme of the mountain river tier possess this much origin power to use? However, little did they know that Ling Han also practiced body arts. His stamina would recover over time, and this was completely different from origin power. More and more people were eliminated as they continued forward, and the original horde of several thousand people had already decreased dramatically, with only several hundred people remaining. Those who were eliminated were mostly from the 4th tier. Some had fled from the formation, while many had also been killed by the stone statues. Right now, the second and third tiers had the most members. There were 100 or so people in the first tier, and there were 300 or so people in the second tier. Meanwhile, both the first and fourth tiers numbered in the single digits. Fight, fight, fight. The hot-bloodedness of the young prodigies was all stimulated, with their pride causing them to become even more resolute. Since this trial exists, it's definitely possible to pass. Since that's the case, why can't I be the person who passes? Such determination was to be lauded at times as it could push cultivators to improve. However, it was also detrimental at times as refusing to back down could cause one to lose their life. After 2 hours or so, the first tier of prodigies finally neared 2/10 of the formation. As the battle prowess of the stone statues had increased after the first 10th of their journey, everyone prepared themselves for when the stone statues would suddenly become stronger. Sure enough, the battle prowess of the stone statues increased again when they passed the 20% mark. A second divine pattern materialized on their fists. Ah! The elder who was using the turtle shell was the first to fall victim. The turtle shell was relentlessly attacked by the stone statues, and the divine patterns that decorated it released an unstable glow. This glow eventually died, and the turtle shell was shattered into 7 pieces. With his defensive treasure shattered, how could the elder stand up against the relentless attacks of the stone statues? He was instantly smashed into pulp, not even having the chance to escape. I'm out. In the face of such a brutal reality, many prodigies chose to swallow their pride. This was only the 3rd stage, and there were still 7 other stages ahead. It would definitely become more and more difficult, and as such, it would be impossible for them to pass. Is this really something that a mountain river tier cultivator can accomplish? However, everyone's eyes instantly turned to Ling Han. He was the only remaining member of the 4th tier. Everyone else had either fled the formation or been killed, yet he, a cultivator at the high extreme of the mountain river tier, still persisted. Who is this person? I know, right? He's not the only person with a treasure, yet he's the only high extreme cultivator remaining. Freak. He's the #1 prodigy in our Chaotic Star's majestic empire, which is located on the Joint Peace planet. He arrived from a small world 2 years ago after opening the sky. Someone from the Chaotic Star's majestic empire was present, and they revealed Wan Xing's identity. What? Everyone was stunned, unable to believe their ears. Was this person joking? Before this, they had felt that Ling Han's cultivation level was too low as he was only at the high extreme of the mountain river tier. Even so, he was still able to advance through the stone statue formation. This made them realize that he was an absolute freak. However, after hearing that Ling Han had only arrived from the small world after opening the sky 2 years ago, their first reaction was that Ling Han's cultivation speed was far too quick. He had only been in the immortal realm for 2 years, yet he had already advanced from the shattering void tier to the high extreme of the mountain river tier? Was this possible? However, there was more than one person from the Chaotic Star's majestic empire here, and they all confirmed that this was true. The others had to believe this even if they didn't want to. After all, there was no point in lying about this. Even if they could fool people for a while, the truth would eventually come out. However, if this were true, then Ling Han was absolutely inhuman. His cultivation speed was shockingly quick. The 400 remaining prodigies quickly decreased to less than 200. This time, it was the 3rd tier that lost the most members, falling from over 300 to just around 30. Some members from the 2nd tier also gave up or died, yet they still maintained a count of over 100. Let's play a guessing game. When do you guys think that cultivator at the high extreme of the mountain river tier will stop? This person's voice was filled with curiosity. This attracted enthusiastic guesses from many people. However, it was a shame that there was no one to bet. After all, no one here had a good enough reputation for others to trust their money with. They came from over 100 different stars, and thus they were all unfamiliar with each other. Master will definitely make it through the formation, Ding Ping said with clenched fists. Of course, the Azura Demon Emperor concurred. Master is wise, mighty, and peerless throughout the world. He can easily complete this formation, even if it's 10 times longer. Shui Yenyu also trusted Ling Han's abilities. However, she couldn't help but grimace upon hearing the Azura Demon Emperor's words. He had already become shameless in order to praise and flatter Ling Han. At this time, even the first tier of cultivators had started to slow down. So what if they were Xia Wuque or Xiao Sisi? They all appeared strained under the relentless attacks from the countless stone statues. However, there was someone who had become quicker. Ling Han. He had already caught up to the third tier, and because of this, the fourth tier no longer existed. This was as he was the last person. Everyone clutched their heads upon seeing this. This was far too astonishing. The others were all slowing down, yet he actually had the ability to speed up. He's not speeding up. Rather, it's the others who have slowed down. However, he hasn't slowed down. Someone revealed the truth. Everyone was stunned. They were under increasing pressure with each step that they took, yet Ling Han was still able to maintain a steady pace. What did this signify? Crazy. The world's gone crazy. How the hell are you only at the high extreme of the mountain river tier? Indeed, Ling Han didn't feel too much pressure. Up until now, the puppets were unable to hurt him, and could only cause him pain. As they couldn't injure him, Ling Han naturally didn't need to use the recovery ability of the indestructible Heaven Scroll. He still had heaps of trump cards. 2 hours passed, and the first tier of prodigies entered the fourth stage. The battle prowess of the stone statues rose again, with the number of divine patterns on their hands increasing to 3. Their power clearly hadn't increased, yet the appearance of these divine patterns raised their battle prowess by a large amount. It was absolutely shocking. The second tier of cultivators started to decrease in numbers. Chapter 1099, 5 Great Prodigies. Not only was the second tier losing members, but the third tier was also losing members. Once again, Ling Han was the only person left. Everyone found this quite amusing. Was this person an omen of bad luck? Were the tiers that he joined all going to crumble? No. It was because he was too powerful, while the others were unable to hang on. The 100 or so prodigies rapidly decreased to less than 50 people, all struggling ahead. The 4 prodigies in the first tier retrieved their weapons at almost exactly the same time. It was clear that they didn't dare to be careless and fight the stone statues with their bare hands. Otherwise, it was possible that they would be kicked out of the formation. It would be extremely embarrassing if that occurred. They were hailed as prodigies, yet at the same time, they couldn't accept any failures. Otherwise, the halo around their heads would disappear. It hurts. Ling Han exclaimed in his mind. In the beginning, he could only just feel the strikes. Afterward, he could feel a little bit of pain. Right now, however, he felt true pain. Being struck by the fists of the stone statues was like a child being heavily smacked in the bottom by an adult. It hurt that much. Thankfully, hurting and actually being injured were two completely different matters. He was still fearless right now. However, this was only the 4th stage. When Ling Han reached the 5th stage, it was extremely likely that he would feel genuine pressure. At that time, the attacks of the stone statues would truly be a threat to him. They would be able to injure him, at the very least. This is incredible. The power of the stone statues is only at the early stage of the consummate level of the mountain river tier. It's probably the might of the regulations. However, the power of regulations unleashed by these stone statues had already exceeded the level of the mountain river tier. It was because of this that they possessed such a lethal might. The 50 or so people slowed down once again, with only Ling Han's speed remaining unchanged. His advance was especially steady, and the 3rd tier that had him as its sole member started to catch up to the 2nd tier. After a short while, he became a member of the 2nd tier. At this moment, there were only 2 tiers left. 5th stage. Just as everyone expected, a fourth divine pattern appeared on the fists of the stone statue. Blood sprayed through the air, and a dozen or so people were immediately knocked out from the second tier. Fortunately, the people who were able to make it to this stage were all prodigies among prodigies. They all had techniques to protect their lives, and thus not a single one of them died, even though they suffered extremely severe wounds. Meanwhile, Ling Han finally felt pressure. When he was struck by the stone statue's fists, even his physique was unable to remain unscathed. Instead, blood started to seep from his skin. It hurt like hell. Ling Han stopped fighting against them head-on. Instead, he increased the power of his attacks as he used his movement techniques and unleashed his annihilating dragon star arrow to obliterate the stone statues in the distance. As for the stone statues closer to him, he cut them down using his fast technique. Only the offensive power of these stone statues had increased, after all, and their defenses hadn't changed a single bit. After increasing the power of his attacks, he finally raised his speed for the first time. He overtook the second tier and started to close in on the first tier. The spear-wielding man and the others had naturally left the stone statue formation already, and they couldn't help but grimace as they watched Ling Han's progress. It was as if they had seen a ghost. This person is far too freakish. Even Wuque paled in comparison. There was truly no shortage of prodigies in the world. There was always a higher mountain behind a peak. Wuque and the three others all glanced back when they sensed a fifth person coming up from behind them. When they saw who it was, their eyes almost popped out of their heads. After reaching their level, they were genuinely supercilious. This wasn't because they were arrogant, but because they were confident in their invincibility. So what if they were up against hundreds or thousands of people? They believed they were invincible, and they could crush anyone who stood in their way. Thus, they had treated only the three other people in the first tier as their opponents. They had never paid attention to anyone in the second tier or lower. Were they worthy? Right now, however, someone had advanced from the second tier, and was gradually catching up to them. This wasn't the most important part. The most important part was that this person was actually only at the high extreme of the mountain river tier. How could they stand being caught up to? Wuque was the most affected by this, and his face almost became green. He hadn't taken Ling Han to heart before, yet Ling Han was actually reeling him in now. Wasn't Ling Han slapping him across the face? As prodigious as he was, it had only ever been him who had slapped others across the face. Since when had he been slapped in the face by others? He gritted his teeth and forcefully raised his speed. This significantly increased the burden on him. If this were the 10th stage, he would be able to give one last push and charge toward the finish line. However, this was only the 5th stage, so he would definitely run out of energy by making a push here. It was hard to say whether he would be able to make it to the end of the stone statue formation. However, he couldn't tolerate letting Ling Han catch up to him, especially since Shui Yenyu was watching from the sides. His dignity and pride wouldn't allow it. His battle prowess was truly powerful, and golden light exuded from his body. His arms turned faint golden in color, and it was as if they were forged from godly metal. He was unscathed even though he faced the attacks of the stone statues head-on. He naturally couldn't maintain this state for a long time, and thus he unleashed his full speed as he charged forward. He had to make the most of his invincibility state to increase the distance between him and Ling Han. That way, even when he came out of this state later, he would still have enough time to recover. Dumb C***NT. Ling Han said in his mind. Wuque was treating him as a powerful rival, yet he didn't take him to heart at all. How could he view someone as his rival if they didn't form 5 mountains and rivers and didn't become a 10-star genius? Although Ling Han hadn't taken that step yet, he was fully confident that it was only a matter of time. He came to a realization that this stone statue formation was most likely prepared for 10-star geniuses. After reaching the consummate level of the mountain river tier, one would be able to advance a stage with each extra star of power that they possessed. If one were a 10-star genius, they would be able to reach the 10th stage. Thus, it was very likely that no one present could pass this formation apart from him. Of course, he wasn't a 10-star genius yet. In fact, he was still a long way from reaching the consummate level of the mountain river tier. However, didn't he have a powerful physique and a freakish recovery ability? These gave him the chance to pass the formation. What he was more curious about was, would there be a reward for successfully passing this stone statue formation? 6th stage. The attacks from the stone statues became increasingly vicious. Power was only a part of battle prowess. This statement held very true here. However, this was only under extremely special circumstances. This was as cultivators couldn't wield regulations as the stone statues could. If one were at the mountain river tier, how would they be able to comprehend the regulations of the sun-moon tier? This wasn't a matter of time, but rather something decided by one's cultivation level. After reaching this stage, there was no need to separate them according to tiers anymore. That was because there were only the 5 of them left: Ling Han, Xia Wuque, Xiao Sisi, Su Jing, and Duan. Who would be the first prodigy to be kicked out? Who would persist until the very end? Who would be the super genius able to barge through? The spectators were all gripped with curiosity. They could clearly leave first, yet none of them was willing to do so. They all waited outside the formation, determined to watch on until the last moment. The 6th stage put them under extreme pressure. Even Ling Han was slightly afraid of the stone statue's attacks. If he were struck by a full power punch, then even he would bleed. It was already so for him, so the other 4 prodigies were naturally under even more pressure. However, the 4 of them had an advantage in cultivation level, with their power and battle prowess both being far above Ling Han's. Thus, although their defenses were weaker than Ling Han's, they were still able to make up for this shortcoming by being more powerful. They gave the stone statues absolutely no chance to strike them. The 5 of them were drenched in sweat. They weren't merely being tested on their strength right now, but also on their willpower. Chapter 1100, First. Few people could persist under such immense pressure. Xia Wuque and the 3 others lived up to their status as young prodigies. Although they hadn't formed their 5th mountain and river, nor reached the height of a 10-star genius, they could completely be viewed as king-tier cultivators who possessed the demeanor and confidence of rulers. They gritted their teeth as they continued to advance. Not a single one of them gave up. 7th stage. The speed of Xia Wuque and the 3 others fell drastically. In fact, they almost ground to a halt. The stone statue formation wasn't as exaggerated as Ling Han had thought it was. The first stage genuinely did correspond to the early stage of the consummate level. Then, the battle prowess of each following stage would increase by 1 star. Thus, the battle prowess of the stone statues in the 7th stage was equivalent to 3 stars above the peak stage of the consummate level. If any one of the stone statues were singled out, Xia Wuque and the others would all be able to defeat it easily. In fact, they wouldn't be afraid even if they had to battle against several dozen of them. The problem was, the number of stone statues here far exceeded a few dozen. Hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands. They were endless, and when their numbers reached a certain threshold, their overwhelming quantity would lead to a qualitative change. Generally speaking, a difference of 1 star could be mitigated if the weaker side had 10 times the number of people. Thus, 1,000 stone statues would be enough to bury either of Xia Wuque or the 3 others, even if they were 6-star geniuses. It was already extremely difficult for them to advance. Moreover, what made them despair was the fact that this was only the 7th stage. Even if they could pass it, there were still 3 even more difficult stages ahead. If the stone statues became stronger according to the same pattern, those at the 10th stage would possess a battle prowess of 6 stars above the peak stage of the consummate level. Just one of them would be enough to match it against Xia Wuque or the others, let alone hundreds upon thousands of them. Passing the 10th stage seemed like an impossible task. Ling Han nodded in his mind. His previous estimation had been wrong, but this formation could indeed only be passed by 10-star geniuses. Could his freakish defenses and recovery ability help him pass this formation? Ling Han wasn't sure. After all, his cultivation level was still too low. If his physique could advance another level, to that of level 5 godly metal, then that would be truly impressive. If he reached that level, he would be able to casually stroll through this place. However, his achievement right now was already enough to scare everyone to death. He was a whopping 6 sub-minor levels weaker, yet he was somehow able to advance alongside Wuque and the other super geniuses. Didn't this mean that Ling Han would be able to easily suppress Wuque and the others as long as he reached the same cultivation level as them? What an astonishing physique! Wuque and the others exclaimed in their minds. Against such defenses, would their battle prowess of 5 or 6 stars really be effective? Ling Han's situation was much better than that of Wuque and the others. Although the stone statues possessed a terrifying destructive ability, their power still remained at the early stage of the consummate level, which was much weaker than him. He charged forward at full speed, prioritizing defense over offense. He would take the stone statues' attacks head-on if he genuinely wasn't able to dodge them. Although his body was riddled with wounds, he had activated the indestructible Heaven Scroll, which healed his wounds in almost an instant. After taking another few steps, Ling Han overtook Duan, who had been in 4th place. There was a look of displeasure on Duan's face as he was overtaken by Ling Han. However, after a moment's thought, he forcefully suppressed his urge to use his trump card. He also had a trump card similar to Wuque's, and it granted him a burst of explosive power. However, he understood that unless he had a battle prowess of 10 stars, it would be impossible for him to pass this stone statue formation. That being the case, why should he reveal his trump card before so many pairs of watchful eyes? It wasn't worth it. He immediately walked out the side, giving up on continuing through the formation. The spectators all sighed and exclaimed. At this point, Ling Han had already defeated a supreme prodigy. By the looks of it, he was clearly going to defeat more. After another while, Ling Han overtook Su Jing, replacing him as 3rd. However, this 3rd place quickly became last place again as Su Jing also chose to give up. Impressive, unbelievably impressive. Everyone watched on in anticipation. Could Ling Han become 1st? Or perhaps even pass through the stone statue formation? It would have been an absolute joke if they had thought this in the beginning. Now, however, it had become a very real possibility. Who would have imagined that someone at the high extreme could be this strong? Ling Han caught up to Xiao Sisi. This woman gazed at Ling Han with a smile as she battled, and she said, "I'm Xiao Sisi. This brother is?" She was a beauty, and her smile was especially enchanting and radiant. It would make one's heart thump with excitement. Ling Han remained calm, and said, "I'm Ling Han. Brother Ling, do you mind if we catch up later?" Xiao Sisi said with a smile. Ling Han nodded, and said, "No problem." He strode past Xiao Sisi, who exited the stone statue formation like the other two. Right now, there were only 2 people remaining. In fact, Wuque also wanted to give up. This was a battle with no hope or purpose. Thus, giving up earlier or later wouldn't make any difference at all. However, it was Ling Han who was catching up to him, and he definitely couldn't give up before Ling Han. His pride kept him going, and it gave him the strength to grit his teeth and continue battling against the stone statues. He continued to fight this lost battle. 8th stage. The stone statues became even more powerful, with 7 divine patterns glowing on their fists. Their destructive ability was astonishing, and although it was impossible for all of them to attack in unison, it was entirely possible for tens or hundreds of them to attack together. Each of their attacks was terrifying, and there was absolutely no space for them to dodge. They could only face the stone statue's attacks head-on. Wah! Wuque instantly vomited blood after facing just one attack. So what if he was a prodigy? The stone statues all possessed a battle prowess that was no weaker than his. Moreover, dozens of them had attacked together, causing him to almost crumble under their strikes. At this moment, he saw Ling Han overtake him. Pooh! He spat another mouthful of blood. This time, he had been angered to the point of spitting blood. The trash in his eyes had overtaken him. How could he accept this? Humph! There was killing intent in his eyes, and he was just about to attack Ling Han. However, there were so many stone statues here, so how could he find an opportunity to strike? Darkness instantly enveloped him as countless stone statues rushed over to attack him. He obviously couldn't counterattack, and the only thing he could do was defend while charging toward the side. Ling Han glanced back for a second. Although Wuque hadn't managed to attack him, Ling Han had sensed his killing intent. Ling Han couldn't help but look down on him. Such a petty prodigy. His success will definitely be limited. He immediately retracted his gaze and placed his full focus on the battle before him. He had already this stage, so he didn't want to give up. Ling Han activated his divine patterns of gravity to disrupt the stone statues, reducing the number of attacks that he had to face as much as possible. Then, he sprinted forward at full speed. This was extremely effective. After all, these stone statues possessed a powerful offensive ability, but merely possessed power at the early stage of the consummate level. This was their biggest weak point, and Ling Han had managed to grab onto it and ferociously exploit it. Oi, oi, oi. If this continues, it's genuinely possible that he'll be able to pass the stone statue formation. There are only 2 stages left. Everyone was stunned. Even super geniuses like Wuque had been unable to manage this great feat yet. A cultivator at the high extreme was closing in on success. This sight was truly hard to believe. However, Ling Han's speed became quicker and quicker. He had an advantage in power, and thus the stone statues were unable to stop him. They were merely able to riddle his body with wounds and send his blood flying through the air. However, Ling Han's footsteps didn't even stop for a second. He was like an arrow, and his speed only continued to increase. Chapter 1101, Surpassing the Legends. Everyone clutched their heads and exclaimed in surprise. This was far too astonishing. Wasn't Wuque struggling to take another step forward? Yet, Ling Han was actually increasing his speed at this moment. Humph! Wuque clenched his fists as killing intent exuding from his body. This person is indeed impressive. He's worth befriending, Su Jing said calmly. He could naturally sense the killing intent that Wuque had toward Ling Han. However, he didn't care. He believed that he was peerless, and his background was also top-notch. Thus, what did he need to be afraid of? Xiao Cixi was extremely beautiful, and she said smilingly, I've long heard of Brother Su's name. It's my honor to meet you today. Although Su Jing had strong willpower, his heart still fluttered when he saw Xiao Cixi's breathtaking beauty. He hurriedly clasped his hands in respect, and said, I've also long heard of Lady Cixi's name. It's a shame that I was never able to meet you before. Hee, if all goes according to plan, we'll meet again at the Majestic Heaven sect, where we'll become fellow students, Duan said. His gaze swept across Ling Han, and he lightly flicked his fingers, saying, at that time, who knows what level this person will have reached? Su Jing and Xiao Cixi both nodded, an expectant look on their faces. In terms of battle prowess alone, they definitely had a crushing advantage over Ling Han. However, this was because Ling Han's cultivation level was far below theirs. Once he reached the same level as them, it was likely that their battle prowess would be hard to differentiate. Even if theirs was still stronger, they would still have no way to deal with Ling Han's physique and recovery ability. Su Jing shook his head after mulling over this for a moment, and said, other than defeating him in one blow, there's truly no other method. Otherwise, one will be exhausted to death by him. He felt that there was no way to deal with Ling Han's defenses. He's merely a lowly commoner from a small world, there's no need to hold him in such high regard. Wuque said. His face was still filled with disdain. Heh. Xiao Cixi and the 2 others merely gave an indifferent chuckle, not bothering to reply. Xia Wuque already hated Ling Han with passion. With this preconception, how could he assess things fairly? As such, there was no need to listen to him. Meanwhile, Ling Han was flying through the formation. The destructive ability of the stone statues had already reached 4 stars above the peak stage of the consummate level of the mountain river tier. Ling Han would definitely be wounded whenever he was struck by their attacks, and these wounds were quite heavy as well. Thus, he didn't dare to slow down, and did his best to minimize the amount of damage that he suffered. Even so, he was still struck frequently, causing his body to become riddled with wounds. If it were someone else, they would have definitely died after suffering so many strikes. However, Ling Han was barely affected. The stone statues could continue to attack him, and he would continue to charge through the formation. Everyone was speechless upon seeing this. How could such a freakish person exist? Are you really a human? Are you sure you're not a puppet forged from godly metal? 9th stage. This stage was even more terrifying as the destructive ability of the stone statues had risen by another star. A bloody hole would appear in Ling Han's body every time he was struck by their fists. In fact, even his godly bones were groaning. The expressions of Xia Wuque and the 3 others changed drastically. Their battle prowess was still above these stone statues, yet they would definitely be wounded if they were to be hit by their attacks. Apart from freaks like Ling Han, the large majority of people had far stronger offensive abilities than defensive abilities. Didn't the saying go, offense was the strongest defense? With our strength, we'll still be able to suppress the stone statues of this stage. As for the next stage, they didn't continue this sentence. At the next stage, every single stone statue would have a destructive ability that was on par with theirs, so what would it be like if hundreds upon thousands of these stone statues attacked them together? If it were a one-on-one battle, they believed that they would still win. In fact, they would be confident even if it were a 1-on-10 battle. After all, these stone statues were only puppets. Each was like a child wielding a supreme god tool. The threat it posed was indeed great, yet one could still achieve a steady victory as long as they dealt with the matter carefully. However, once the number of stone statues increased to what they saw in the stone statue formation, there was simply no way to achieve victory. Although we're 6-star geniuses, we can only admit defeat when faced with the last stage. Don't tell me one genuinely has to raise their physique and recovery ability to such an incredible level in order to pass. Xiao Sisi pondered for a moment before saying, "Have you guys heard about the existence of 8 or even 9-star geniuses in the distant galaxies?" Su Jing nodded, and said, "I've indeed heard of these rumors. However, so what? I've already raised each of my cultivation levels to perfection, yet my power is still only 6 stars. Taking into account some secret techniques, I can wield a battle prowess of 7 stars. However, 8 stars? That's hard to imagine. Don't forget that 5-star geniuses are already considered to be legends in our galaxy." A meaningful smile appeared on Xiao Sisi's face, and she said, "Since we've already surpassed the legends, this proves that the legends are completely realizable. Thus, it won't be surprising if 8 or 9-star geniuses genuinely exist." This. Su Jing and Duan were both stunned. They were already supreme prodigies who stood at the summit of the younger generation. However, they were unable to imagine how they could take another step forward. Duan's heart shuddered, and he said, "Could that legend also be?" Su Jing involuntarily exclaimed in surprise, and asked, "You've also heard of that legend?" Xia Wuque finally joined in on their conversation begrudgingly, saying, "Humph. Are you talking about the 5th mountain and river? What a joke. The mountain river tier only has 4 minor tiers, and this is the unbreakable law of cultivation. How can one possibly form a 5th mountain and river?" Xiao Sisi agreed with his viewpoint, and said, "Indeed. We should be the most powerful prodigies in the world. Moreover, we opened the sky from a small world, and we've also raised each cultivation level to perfection. However, I've found that my 4 mountains and rivers have formed an extremely stable state. It's absolutely impossible to form a new mountain and river." Su Jing and Duan both nodded in agreement. They had naturally attempted to form a new mountain and river and become a legendary prodigy after hearing of the rumors. However, they saw no hope for success. Most importantly, this was only a rumor, so they had been extremely unsure themselves. Perhaps it was an impossible task to begin with? This caused their willpower to waver. Should they really put all of their efforts into this? If this were genuinely just a rumor, they would suffer far too great of a loss. However, I believe that it's possible to form 5 mountains and rivers now. Xiao Cici's eyes glimmered with intelligence, and she said, otherwise, this stone statue formation is absolutely impossible to pass. Su Jing nodded in agreement, and said, that's right. If one forms another mountain and river, they'll be able to possess a battle prowess on par with pseudo-Sun-Moon tier elites even though they haven't actually reached the Sun-Moon tier yet. In that case, there's definitely hope of passing this formation. Great minds think alike. I'm definitely going to form 5 mountains and rivers. If I don't succeed, I won't break through to the Sun-Moon tier. Duan, who was brimming with confidence, continued, I'll either be a prodigy at the summit of cultivators, or I'll die trying. Agreed. Xiao Cici and Su Jing both nodded seriously. It was a rare delight to find others with similar aspirations on the path to the summit of cultivation. They weren't lonely. Xia Wuque wore a look of indifference. However, thoughts swirled through his mind. He had to admit that forming 5 mountains and rivers was the best method to pass this formation. Ling Han was probably using some other, crooked method. Who else possessed such a freakish physique and recovery ability? He watched on in jealousy as Ling Han sped through the 9th stage and headed into the final stage. Chapter 1102, Reward. 10th stage. If there were no hidden surprises, the destructive ability of the stone statues would reach the same level as Xia Wuque and the others. This was almost impossible to defeat. One had to realize that no one in this galaxy had formed 5 mountains and rivers. Thus, a power of 6 stars was already the strongest. Anyhow, how many prodigies could reach a power of 6 stars? In order to reach this level, they had to open the sky from a small world. Even if there were more of these prodigies in addition to Xia Wuque and the 3 others, they most likely numbered in the single digits. There wouldn't be too many of them. Now, however, tens of thousands of stone statues that possessed a destructive ability on this level were ruthlessly attacking Ling Han. Xia Wuque and the 3 other prodigies involuntarily sucked in cold breath. If it were them, they would only be able to last for a few seconds under such relentless and ruthless attacks. If they didn't use their trump cards, it was even possible that they would be unable to flee from the formation. Meanwhile, Ling Han was finally being challenged. Not only would blood spurt from his body when he was punched by the stone statues, but his flesh would also crack open. In fact, even his godly bones became covered in a web of cracks. They didn't break, but if he were punched a few more times, they definitely wouldn't be able to remain intact. How many stone statues were in this formation? Peng, 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 peng. Divine patterns dazzled, and fists flew about. Pa, pa, pa. The sound of bones breaking continuously traveled out from Ling Han's body. The sound was especially clear even though he was engaged in such an intense battle. He definitely can't hold on anymore. Everyone experienced jealousy, especially prodigies who believed that they were number 1 in the world. They naturally wished that no one could surpass themselves. Thus, even Xiao Cici and the 2 other prodigies who had no conflicts with Ling Han didn't want to see him pass. Their self-confidence would take a huge hit if he could pass while they couldn't. Right now, Ling Han suffered broken bones with each step that he advanced. How could he possibly pass the last stage? He would only end up being smashed into a pulp if he stubbornly continued forward. A cold sneer appeared on Xia Wuque's face. Right now, he truly wished that Ling Han's willpower would be more resolute. If Ling Han continued, it would spare him the trouble of having to deal with him himself. Ling Han's defense was too freakish, and even he wasn't confident that he could kill him. Although this wouldn't sate his resentment enough, who was he? Did he need to bother so much with a lowly commoner? He would be happy as long as Ling Han died. Ling Han continued to shed blood as he advanced. His body had already distorted significantly. The attacks from the stone statues were too concentrated, and even the indestructible Heaven Scroll couldn't heal his wounds in time. The second and third wave of attacks arrived at this time, and these caused his wounds to become even more severe. His godly bones mended, yet they did so in incorrect places. However, this didn't matter, as they would be immediately broken or crushed again. Ling Han barely had time to breathe. There's still half a stage. Ling Han silently took note of his progress in his mind. He had already completed half of the 10th stage, and this filled him with confidence. He used a drop of indestructible true fluid, which instantly healed all of his wounds. He roared loudly and immediately increased his speed. Fuck! The spectators by the two sides were all dumbfounded. Meanwhile, a string of curses raced through their minds. Freak, this person is definitely a freak. You looked like you were just about to fail, yet you suddenly became energetic and filled with vigor again. Are you messing with us on purpose? Ling Han stopped attacking, and unleashed his divine patterns of gravity with all his might. His legs became a blur as he raised his speed to an extreme. 6/10, 7/10, 8/10, 9/10. The finish line was in sight. Everyone watched on in suspense. Although Ling Han had suddenly unleashed a burst of explosive power, the attacks of the stone statues weren't becoming any weaker. He was beaten beyond recognition in no time, his broken bones becoming exposed and clear for all to see. Was he still a person? He looked like a pile of mangled flesh. However, this pile of mangled flesh was still charging forward. At the same time, Ling Han's godly bones emitted a dazzling radiance that was filled with an aura of eternity. Last 10 steps. Charge. Ling Han gritted his teeth. Pang, 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 pang. He was ruthlessly attacked, and he felt like he were about to die. Right now, he really wanted to seek refuge in the Black Tower. However, he had already made it so far, so how could he give up? Fortunately, he had crippled himself several times when he had undergone a heavenly tribulation. Thus, he was already a little accustomed to this kind of pain. Otherwise, it was genuinely possible that he would have lost his consciousness due to the pain. He circulated another drop of indestructible true fluid. However, even the effects of the indestructible true fluid would decrease significantly when used in quick succession. It was only enough to help him hang on. 8 steps. 5 steps, 3 steps. Ling Han roared and charged toward the finish line. Wang! His surroundings suddenly became pitch black. Ling Han lay on the floor, and he discovered that the stone statues around him had all disappeared. However, the spectators on the two sides weren't here either. It appeared as if he had entered another space with his final leap. Pang! A stone tablet appeared, seemingly cut from white jade. It was even radiating a gentle glow. There were words on the stone tablet. Ling Han didn't read them, instead choosing to heal his wounds first. He raised his head to look at the stone tablet after recovering some of his battle prowess. When I was young, I charged into the puppet sect alone, destroying all 1 million of their puppets. This feat was ranked first in all of history. This is a duplicate of that formation, and I laid it so that the future generations can remember my greatness. Person of the future, although you passed this formation, you must realize that I've already decreased the battle prowess of the stone statue formation by a significant margin. However, since you were able to pass, you're just strong enough to be worthy of praise. You possess some of my demeanor, so I'll grant you some rewards. Make sure to remember my might and generosity. There weren't many words, and Ling Han was able to read through it quickly. He couldn't help but grimace. The person who'd left this stone tablet was far too narcissistic. I'm only at the high extreme now, so when I reach the consummate level I don't even need to reach the peak stage. Me godly bones will soar to reach a strength of level 5 godly metal. What would it matter even if this stone statue formation were 10 times more powerful? Whatever, there's no point in arguing with someone who's already dead for heaven knows how long. Ling Han shook his head. He raised his gaze above the stone tablet as this was where his reward was. I don't even know the name of that narcissistic person. Ling Han found 4 items above the stone tablet, 3 sheets of paper and a black metallic ball. Vajra seal, lion seal, quick cloud seal, and what the hell is this ball? Fortunately, there were still some words on the back of the stone tablet that described the uses of the 4 items. The Vajra seal acts on the body and can raise one's defenses to the pinnacle of the sun-moon tier. Gasp. This is amazing. The Vajra seal can be used between 1 to 10 times, depending on the length of time the seal is activated during each usage. Ling Han picked the Vajra seal up. There were strange symbols drawn on the seal, and it exuded an ancient and heavy aura. Is this for real? Ling Han weighed the seal in his hand, and said, if the description is to be believed, I don't have to be afraid even when I'm facing sun-moon tier elites. However, it's extremely likely that I'll be digging my own grave if this old senior is kidding around with me. This was entirely possible. One could tell that the old senior was insanely narcissistic and a little out of touch just by reading the message that he had left on the stone tablet. When activated, the lion seal can raise one's power to the pinnacle of the sun-moon tier. It can also be used between 1 to 10 times. The quick cloud seal can raise one's speed to the pinnacle of the sun-moon tier. It can also be used between 1 to 10 times. Tisk, TSK, TSK. Wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Ling Han picked the black metallic ball up, and murmured, this is actually a sun-moon tier puppet? Unbelievable. He looked at the instructions on the stone tablet, and then tossed the black metallic ball into the air after pressing it a few times. The metallic ball instantly transformed, growing larger and larger. Its shape also changed, and arms and legs started to extend from the ball. It wasn't long before it transformed into a metallic person. Chapter 1103, Going Solo. To confirm whether it's real or fake, we only need to have the Azura Demon Emperor enter and test it out. Ling Han put away the puppet. There were no true origin stones inserted inside, hence, it could only do some simple transformations. It was not equipped with any real power. When he put away the puppet, lights suddenly flashed before his eyes. After he had appeared in the stone statue formation, people were running towards him from both sides. It was as if none of them had realized that he had previously vanished for a period of time. Though this period of time was not long, it was still as long as a few breaths' time, yet not one person had realized it. The means of a great elite were truly amazing. Ling Han. Master. Both Shui Yenyu and Ding Ping ran over, the admiration on their faces not the slightest bit concealed. It had really been too difficult. Even such unprecedented prodigies like Xia Wuque could only give up, but Ling Han, who was merely in the high extreme, actually successfully passed the test. With such a comparison, it was clear how incredible such an achievement was. Congratulations, Brother Ling. Xiao Sisi and the others also walked over. In the meanwhile, Xia Wuque humphed coldly. He hesitated slightly, and then strode off with the spear-wielding man and his other subordinates. He wanted to kill Ling Han, but going by the current situation, it seemed to be difficult to do so. Putting aside that freakish defense of Ling Han's, Xiao Sisi and the others would definitely not allow him to do so. Thus, he chose to leave. What the eye didn't see, the heart didn't grieve over. Some people came over to strike up a conversation with Ling Han, but with Xiao Sisi and the others there, their presence was really too strong, intimidating the masses so much that they could barely speak. Soon enough, they left as well. Xiao Sisi and the others were of the mind to befriend Ling Han, and ensured their attitudes were extremely humble. However, this was not a good place for conversation. Thus, the 4 of them made an agreement to sit down and have a nice chat after entering into the Majestic Heaven sect. The crowd dispersed. Everyone felt a little disappointed because they had seen with their own eyes that Ling Han had walked out of the stone statue formation, yet had not obtained any reward. Despite going through such difficulty, he had not gained anything. This was naturally a disappointment. When the masses had dispersed, Ling Han tossed out that metal ball, and said, "Little Azura, try entering into this puppet." He had already filled in true origin stones. The Azura Demon Emperor quickly did as he commanded. Bang! This human-shaped puppet immediately stamped a foot down, exuding an incredibly terrifying aura. Master, this is a sun-moon tier puppet," he uttered in a trembling voice, almost about to pass out. Previously, when the two pseudo-sun-moon tier puppets had been lost, he had almost died of heartache. After possessing immense power, and then losing it, who would be capable of glossing over it? He had never thought that after only about a year's time passed, his master would have gained a true sun-moon tier puppet. This was too awesome. "Try it out, what level has it reached?" Ling Han asked. After the Azura Demon Emperor made a few movements, he replied, in reply to Master, "It should be in the medium extreme of the sun-moon tier." Only in the medium extreme. Ling Han was slightly dissatisfied, but since it had been free, his demand should not be too high, should it? He nodded, and said, "This puppet is yours to use." "Thank you, Master. This little Azura will work even harder. Be cautious and conscientious, meticulous, strive to the utmost." The Azura Demon Emperor was again expressing his position. He had now gained a puppet of sun-moon tier, but he did not dare to have the slightest thought of rebellion. His wildness had long since been worn away by Ling Han. In his mind, since Ling Han could give him a sun-moon tier puppet to use with a light heart, this meant that he had an even stronger trump card in hand, and could easily subdue him. He had not guessed wrongly on this part. However, even if Ling Han did not possess something like the Vajra seal, he could still easily recapture the Azura Demon Emperor. The Azura Demon Emperor's divine senses level was too low, after all. Ling Han needed only use the 7-kill subduing soul technique to knock him out, and then easily draw him into the Black Tower. By that time, he could then easily do with him as he liked. Ling Han healed his body first as it no longer was subject to the attack of the stone statues. With the channeling of the indestructible Heaven Scroll, his recovery abilities were amazing, and very soon, he became completely uninjured. He changed into a new suit of robes, and smilingly said, "Let's go." The 3 people and 1 puppet set off, continuing on their journey. On the way, Ling Han told Shui Yenyu and Ding Ping how he had obtained 3 divine seals and the puppet. "The person buried here, who exactly is it? It doesn't feel like a tomb. How could he still be so leisurely and refined after death?" Shui Yenyu and Ding Ping both felt that it was inconceivable. "Just think, you could have just buried yourself good and proper, so why had you come up with so many antics? Unwilling to remain lonely?" Ling Han murmured. In the end, no one could escape death. Perhaps this great elite sang his own praises because he did not want to be forgotten. The life essence here was very amazing. Not only could it advance one's cultivation level, it could also heal the hidden injuries one had received during cultivation, and fully nurture his body. This was a very immense help. Some simply chose not to continue exploring, thinking that their abilities were too weak, and they would not be able to win over the others. Hence, they found a quiet place, stopped, and began to cultivate and nurse themselves. Nursing their bodies to the prime condition was naturally beneficial to cultivation. "Master, I have broken through." Only after a few days, Ding Ping thus exclaimed. With Ling Han's alchemical pills forcefully pouring into him, his cultivation level naturally increased rapidly. This was the immortal realm, and it was comparatively easy for one to advance in the mortal territory of cultivation levels. In terms of mental state, he had the reincarnation tree. If it were not for the fact that Ding Ping still had to advance to the pinnacle of 19 stars of strength, he could have broken through long ago. Ling Han stood guard for him. Even in the galaxy, the regulations of the heavenly Tao were everywhere. Immediately, divine thunder could be heard, and lightning began to strike madly at Ding Ping. Ding Ping had cultivated Shattering Void tier almost to perfection, but because he was not the master of a small world, he had no hope of reaching 20 stars of strength. However, 19 stars was still extremely awesome. This allowed his battle prowess to be incredibly frightening, and the heavenly tribulation he had to endure was relatively easier. After half a day, he had also advanced into a mortal level. Master, may I travel around on my own? He was filled with longing, hoping that he could be like his 3 uncles, traveling extensively and learning through experience on his own. Ling Han smiled faintly, and asked, "So, your wings have hardened then?" Ding Ping was so scared he quickly knelt, and exclaimed, "Disciple dares not." Ling Han thought for a moment, then drew out the Swift Cloud Talisman, and handed it over to this disciple. He said, "Take it. In a dangerous situation, it will help you escape. In the future, we shall reunite at the entrance." Master. Ding Ping was incredibly touched. This was something that his master had obtained by surviving the stone statue formation, and was extremely valuable. "Take it," Ling Han said smilingly. He had the cloud-piercing shuttle, so the Swift Cloud Talisman was not as useful to him as one would think. Ding Ping knelt and bowed respectfully towards Ling Han. Only then did he take the Swift Cloud Talisman, and left in big strides. "Are you really at ease?" Shui Yanyu questioned. Ling Han did not speak. After a while, he said, "The boy's grown up, so I should allow him to soar. Furthermore, when I was at the cultivation level that he is presently at, didn't I run all the way to the imperial capital on my own and woo myself a beautiful girl?" Shui Yanyu knew that he was teasing her, and couldn't help but roll her eyes. Yet, at the same time, she was slightly pleased. What woman did not like hearing her love compliment her on her beauty? Ling Han laughed loudly, wrapped his arms around this seductive beauty, and kissed her. Shui Yanyu was greatly embarrassed, and pointing at the Azura Demon Emperor, exclaimed, "There's still someone here." The Azura Demon Emperor was stunned, and hurriedly crouched down and barked like a dog. He even wanted to wag his tail, yet realized that he was no longer that wolf. Involuntarily, he felt a little awkward, and grinning sheepishly, said, "Mistress, don't think of this little Azura as a person." He was indeed quite shameless. Chapter 1104, Forest of the Sea. Ling Han and Shui Yanyu were intimate with each other, and if they begrudged the Azura Demon Emperor for being in the way, Ling Han would draw him into the Black Tower, which made the Azura Demon Emperor very exasperated. He really wanted to say that he was merely formed from a mass of chaotic demonic chi, and was not a human. You guys were merely embracing each other, but even if you did this and that, in his eyes, it was no different from looking at 2 dogs. Of course, he would not dare say such a thing even if he died. Otherwise, there was a chance that he would really be killed. Walking on this expansive plain, there seemed to be no end. This would make many people become impatient, and eventually give up. Time passed, day after day. Ling Han's and Shui Yenyu's cultivation level was soaring. With an alchemy emperor added with the reincarnation tree, it would be difficult for their cultivation levels not to soar. After half a month, Shui Yenyu's cultivation level had reached the late stage of the medium extreme. This was extremely amazing. Ling Han still needed a bit of time to reach the peak stage of the high extreme. After all, the higher the cultivation level, the slower one would be to advance. Finally, the expansive plains no longer appeared in front of their eyes. Instead, a massive sea appeared. However, this huge sea was incredibly strange. The bottom of the sea was connected to the plains. It could even be claimed that the plains were a part of the giant sea, and the seawater had merely been removed. Ahead of them, a wall of water suddenly appeared. It rose up from the horizon, and undulated there. Meanwhile, the seabed was no longer dull and lonely, containing nothing. Instead, a forest was growing there. Forest of the Sea. Every tree was rooted on the seabed, and had trunks that were several dozen thousand meters tall. However, they were very flexible. Rather than saying that they were trees, it would be more appropriate to call them weeds, though they looked a little shocking. The trees' leaves lightly waved. Most of them were even larger than a whole house, so if anyone hid behind them, it would be very difficult to discover their presence. The seawater had a very strong effect of blocking divine sense, and their vision was incapable of seeing through these leaves. Thus, even if those that entered here were not blind, the area still managed to decrease the level of sensitivity of divine sense greatly. Be careful of the Dark Night Hall, Shui Yenyu warned immediately. Previously, because of the actions of the great elite, cultivators of different cultivation levels were separated without their knowledge, but when they came here, they had already seen elites of the Sun-Moon tier. It was obvious that the separated people had again been gathered together without their knowledge. The Dark Night Hall already knew that Ling Han was not easy to kill, so if they once again mobilized an assassin, he would definitely be at the Sun-Moon tier. Previously, it was impossible for them to meet, but now, that might not be the case. Perhaps one was lying in ambush in the forest of the sea, waiting for them. Ling Han nodded. He was confident, but was definitely not blindly conceited. With his present abilities, Sun-Moon tier would be able to insta-kill him. His physique of level 4 godly metal would be useless as well. Even if a few of his godly bones had not been shattered, his spirit would definitely collapse, and he would still die. To stand against Sun-Moon tier, even if it was the low extreme of Sun-Moon tier, he would have to reach the level of 10 stars at least. And to reach 10 stars in the Mountain River tier, he would have to first form the 5th Mountain River, and reach perfection in his cultivation. Ling Han was still a bit far from this step. Don't worry, Master. I will definitely do my best. As long as I am here, I will definitely ensure your safety. The Azura Demon Emperor said confidently, clapping his chest in assurance. Let's go. They entered into the forest of the sea. It was a good thing that there was a change, for it meant that they were walking in the right direction. Otherwise, if they continued to walk around in circles on the plain, where would the end be? Thankfully, the seawater merely shrank down the distance that divine sense could cover a great many times, and did not have special regulations suppressing them unlike in the Star Sea. Hence, even if a battle started in the water, the abilities of cultivators would not be weakened too much. There was not only the giant underwater forest here, there were also giant fishes swimming among the trees. They were really big fish, and were as long as a few dozen thousand meters. A flick of their fish tail, and a great tsunami would be caused. Even Sun-Moon tier elites would not be able to steady themselves, and would be swept out a great distance by the powerful waves. Even if these massive fishes were not demonic beasts, merely the strength of their physical bodies alone was already frightening enough. That was why strength was considered the very most important part of battle prowess. Even if these great fishes were not demonic beasts, their battle prowess was enough to shake even Sun-Moon tier elites. The weeds in the underwater forest possessed great toughness. Otherwise, they would have been torn apart with a few flicks of the tails of these colossal fishes. Ling Han and Shui Yenyu walked among them, feeling that they were pitifully small. Of course, not all creatures were so huge. Ling Han had seen a few small fishes, but these small fishes were also a few dozen meters long. However, compared to the bodies of the giant fishes, which were a few dozen thousand meters long, they really could only be called small fishes. However, while the big fishes were not violent, the small fishes were. The giant fishes could not bother to dally with cultivators, but the small fishes were extremely violent. The moment they discovered the presence of cultivators, they would immediately attack brazenly. These small fishes were very strange. All their scales were made of metal, and their teeth were as sharp as knives, flickering with a sinister light. They were very tough to deal with. Their metal scales had a very strong defensive effect, and their teeth were incredibly sharp. If a cultivator of the same level were to fight them, without extraordinary battle prowess, there was a high chance he would suffer a great deal. Ling Han, however, was not scared. Instead, he was pleased. He was just worrying about not having any level 2 godly metal to increase the might of the divine demon sword. Weren't these materials delivered right to his doorstep? Boom! A fish flicked its tail, producing a powerful movement. It charged over at Ling Han, and the water rippled as it moved, causing one to be unable to maintain his footing. Ling Han opened all the pores on his body, and poured out origin power. Suddenly, he shot out like an arrow, charging towards that fish. The power of this fish was only equivalent to the level of the medium extreme of Mountain River tier, so how could it be of any match for Ling Han? In a few moves, Ling Han had cleanly ripped off all the scales of its body, and it had become a naked fish. "I will spare your life." Ling Han grinned. With a powerful toss, he threw the fish out. After absorbing the essence of godly metal of the fish scales, the divine demon sword experienced a sliver of a boost. Of course, it was only a sliver. However, not too long after, that fish swam back towards them. Its distinctive traits were too obvious. All its fish scales had been removed, and in this place, it should be the only one like this. However, it was not all on its lonesome. Instead, it had brought along a large school of its kind. At least a few hundred violent fishes charged over, every one of them bearing their sharp teeth, boiling with killing intent. "How does it feel to have your good deed repaid with evil?" Shui Yanyu teased. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, "Why do I feel like this is a gift instead?" True, it was only a few hundred violent fishes. In front of him, they were completely lacking as opponents, and were merely here to increase the grade of the divine demon sword. He charged out, his divine demon sword flicking, stabbing, slicing, and slashing. Multiple fish scales were torn down by his strikes, and turned into dust. Their essence, meanwhile, was absorbed by the divine demon sword, allowing it to rapidly advance towards the level of level 3 godly metal. Even though there was only a few hundred fishes, it had to be known that these were only small fish. Even one was a few dozen meters long, so the amount of godly metal was incredibly shocking. When Ling Han had killed most of these fish, the divine demon sword suddenly shone brilliantly, and once again, a qualitative change took place. And in this process, Ling Han also inserted his martial intent within, instantly forming 23 divine patterns. Last time, Ling Han had been unprepared, and thus had only engraved 7 divine patterns, but he was prepared this time, so he was naturally able to lay down even more divine patterns. A level 3 god tool. Ling Han was overjoyed. He delivered a careless slash, and Hong, a 3,000-meter-long sword ray swept out. Pu, 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 pu. At least half of the violent fishes had been slashed in half by this sword ray. Chapter 1105, Tricolor Wind and Fire Lotus. Ling Han was very pleased he had not put much power into this blow. It was completely the power of the divine demon sword alone. It was obviously just a level 3 god tool, but because his martial intent was engraved on it, it actually possessed might above its level. It was definitely capable of matching a level 4 god tool. So even god tools could have tier-surpassing battle abilities? Shua, the remaining violent fish hurriedly flicked their tails, and fled in the opposite direction. Previously, Ling Han had merely descaled them, but did not kill them, which made these violent fishes have no qualms about attacking him, but when they discovered that this man was not a saint and was not to be trifled with, they naturally made a swift getaway. So this is the greatest divine sword in the world? Shui Yanyu had naturally seen Jin Zhihui, and knew that he had especially come to deliver a sword to Ling Han. Ling Han nodded, and replied, "I owe him a huge favor." Shui Yanyu smiled, and said, "This is definitely a big favor, but I believe that only in your hands would this sword really reach its pinnacle. For a swordsmith, this is what he would most want to see. Otherwise, if it was hidden in his own hands, it would only be covering a brilliant pearl with dirt." "Wife, you are getting better and better at talking, your little mouth is really very sweet." Ling Han grinned, acting like he was about to pinch Shui Yanyu's cheek, causing the latter to directly roll her eyes at him, filled with irritation. "I am really expectant. Let us have some even more powerful violent fish, and let this sword advance to the height of level 4 godly metal." Shui Yanyu peered into the distance, and abruptly turned ashen as she exclaimed, "You jinx!" A giant fish was swimming towards them. It was as much as a few thousand meters long, and though it was not the largest, when the waves it created surged towards them, they directly swept both Ling Han and Shui Yanyu away. They did not have the slightest ability to resist. The strength of this fish has reached Sun-Moon tier at least, Ling Han declared. The giant fish approached tumultuous, opened its huge mouth, and all the surrounding seawater suddenly began surging towards its mouth. Ling Han and Shui Yanyu were no exception either, as they were sucked along with the seawater, heading towards it. Move! Ling Han shouted. The Azura Demon Emperor quickly charged out. The power of Sun-Moon tier surged, and shooting out a fist, it compressed the seawater, forming a shock wave that continued to become bigger, and slammed towards the big fish. Pung! The massive fish was suddenly sent flying a few thousand meters. The strength behind this punch was extremely immense. A part of its body had even caved it, causing bloody water to seep out. The giant fish charged back in rage born from pain. With a sweep of its tail, a furious wave rolled out. The Azura Demon Emperor went to meet this strike. Though he was pitifully small in size, he did not lose in terms of strength. He shot out a fist in a direct confrontation with the giant fish, and both sides were sent flying back. The man and fish battled furiously. Neither of them were cultivators in the true essence of the word. One was a puppet, depending on true origin stones and formation patterns which allowed it to possess battle prowess of the Sun-Moon tier, whereas the other was gifted by nature, possessing a massive body and frightening strength. This was just like an ant. How long would it have to cultivate to be able to possess strength equivalent to a normal human's? The power on both sides was more or less equal. However, the puppet had an advantage in that it lacked the ability to feel pain, and its body was forged out of high-grade godly metal. Naturally, it had a huge lead, and after a few dozen moves, a great many scales had been torn off the giant fish, which began to bleed. It was afraid now. With a flick of its tail, it fled quickly. Fuck, I am really too awesome now. The Azura Demon Emperor declared proudly. Being able to send an opponent of the Sun-Moon tier fleeing was something that he couldn't even begin to imagine doing in the past. This was too awesome. When he saw Ling Han walk over, the Azura Demon Emperor immediately wiped the conceit off his face, and switched to a pandering expression. He exclaimed, "I am really too grateful to you, Master. Master, you are like a second parent to me, the bright sun on the path that I am walking, wherever you shine is where light is." He began to ingratiate himself with Ling Han madly, completely having no idea what the word sickening meant. Enough, enough. I'm about to vomit. Ling Han hurriedly waved him off, causing Shui Yanyu to purse her lips in an amused smile. Only then did the Azura Demon Emperor sheepishly become quiet, feeling that he had not praised enough. In any case, he could not possibly increase his abilities through cultivation, so he had been training his skill of sucking up these few days. It was so rare for him to have such a good opportunity to use this skill. He had not thought that just when he had barely started, he would be stopped, which made him a little depressed. Why did Master not allow him to show off his strength? After sinking deep into the Great Sea, this forest showed its magnificent appearance. These massive weeds were no longer of the same dark green color, but had become brilliantly colored. Some were purple, red, and orange, and the colors of the fishes had similarly become even richer and more colorful. However, the threat posed by these fishes increased further. These big giants obviously did not have the slightest tremor of origin power, yet were born with divine patterns, which gave them unique abilities. There were gigantic octopuses that would spit out ink when encountered, dyeing their surroundings completely black. Not only could they not even see the fingers on their own hands, even their divine sense would be completely blocked, causing one to become completely blind, and they could only submit themselves to attacks. There were giant fish that had multicolored sharp spikes growing from their heads. Ling Han watched one penetrate the body of another huge fish with a spike, killing the latter in a single move. And there were also others that possessed strong poison. There was completely no need for them to strike their opponents directly. The area they swam through was a zone of poison in itself. A great many giant fish directly turned over and died, killed easily by poison. This was a dangerous place. Big fish would eat small fish, and small fish would eat cultivators. Of course, when big fish feasted, they would not mind also eating a few cultivators as they did. Everywhere, there were the bones of giant fish. There were also severed body parts of cultivators. Usually, there would only be an arm, a leg, or a head, floating around in the huge sea. The cloud-piercing shuttle was not useful in this underwater area, so Ling Han did not use this god tool. When they met with giant fish below the medium extreme of Sun-Moon tier, he would have the Azura Demon Emperor deal with it, and if they encountered even stronger ones, they would hide into the Black Tower. They would only leave when the coast was clear. The fish here still had a bit of value. The bones of some fish were made of metal, their quality comparable to godly metal of the same level. Thus, as long as they met such fish, Ling Han would draw them into the Black Tower. In future, he could use them to increase the might of the divine demon sword. In a certain corner of the deep sea, Empress Wanxing was standing opposite an old man, and near them, there was a tricolored lotus flower in full bloom. Even in such an environment, one could still smell its beautiful fragrance. As expected, this was a divine herb. Otherwise, how could it have attracted the attention of Empress Wanxing? But that old man was actually capable of standing strong against her, showing that his abilities were definitely extraordinary. They both stood with hands crossed behind their backs. In a diameter of about 3 meters around them, there was actually not even a drop of seawater, which showed their powerful abilities, being capable of blocking even the seawater in this place. This is merely a tricolor wind and fire lotus, and would need at least a few million years to evolve into a 7-colored one. It is not of any use to you at all, so why don't you allow me to have it? I shall not take it for nothing, either. I am willing to part with 3 dragon fragrance pills as compensation. How about it? The old man asked. Tricolor wind and fire lotus was a unique treasure of heaven and earth. If a mountain river tier cultivator drew it into the space of his dantian, he would be nurtured by the divine lotus at all times. Not only would his cultivation rapidly accumulate, he could also communicate with the Tao of heaven and earth with the help of the divine lotus because it was a great treasure of the heaven and earth. Even the comprehension of his cultivation level would be amazingly accelerated. However, when the cultivator advanced into the sun-moon tier, the essence of the divine lotus would have been expended, and would naturally wilt. This was still a tricolored one. If it had reached 5 colors, it could be used by sun-moon tier cultivators, and for a 7-colored one, even heavenly body tier elites would treat it like an ultimate treasure. Chapter 1106, Crimson Fire Needle. Empress Wanxing was enveloped in an aura of primal chaos. As she blinked, great stars materialized behind her back before quickly disappearing again. Those at the consummate level of the heavenly body tier could only possess 4 heavenly bodies, yet the materialization and vanishing of these heavenly bodies was far too frequent, so much so that it looked like there were countless heavenly bodies radiating behind her back. A boundless aura radiated from them, exuding her might as a ruler. She humphed and said, "I'll give you 5 dragon fragrance pills." The elder faltered for a moment. I'm offering you 3 dragon fragrance pills so you can give up on this tricolor wind and fire lotus, yet you're offering me 5 back. Are you trying to defeat me with your wealth? In any case, dragon fragrance pills were extremely valuable pills that could increase a heavenly body tier elite's comprehension of the great Tao. The elder had offered 3 dragon fragrance pills as there was a descendant he really adored. This descendant had just broken through to the mountain river tier, and with the help of this tricolor wind and fire lotus, they would be able to complete the mountain river tier in just 1,000 years, or perhaps even several hundred years. Moreover, it would help them reach perfection in all of the minor levels. If it weren't for his descendant, this tricolor wind and fire lotus would have been completely useless to him. As such, how could he have offered such a high price? Of course, one could also plant the lotus if they had enough patience. After absorbing the essence of heaven and earth for a few 100 million years, it would perhaps become a 7-colored wind and fire lotus. After tens of billions of years, it would perhaps become a 9-colored wind and fire lotus. However, who could wait for such a long time? The elder pondered for a moment before nodding, and saying, "Fine, 5 dragon fragrance pills. The tricolor wind and fire lotus is yours." Empress Wuque casually tossed a spatial ring toward the elder. She was extremely domineering, and she never hesitated with what she did. She started to stride toward the lotus. "Wait!" the elder shouted. He extended his arm to block her. Killing intent appeared on Empress Wuque's face. Was the elder going back on their deal? I'm not one to go back on my word. However, don't you think you should let me verify the authenticity of the dragon fragrance pills first? Empress Wuque didn't speak. However, she stopped walking toward the tricolor wind and fire lotus. The elder's request wasn't excessive. After all, who would trust a stranger? The elder retrieved a vial of pills from the spatial ring. Then, he unplugged the cork and poured an alchemical pill out. He studied it for a while, and a smile eventually appeared on his face. He nodded, and said, "You're indeed a trustworthy person." Empress Wuque walked before the lotus and started to carefully dig it out. She had to be careful. This was because the lotus had to be in perfect condition when it was placed into a cultivator's dantian. Otherwise, its effects would fall dramatically. She retrieved a cloth pouch that was only as big as a person's palm. However, it was easily able to hold the lotus that measured 3 feet in height. She tied the pouch to her waist. Spatial spirit tools couldn't hold living beings. This was something that everyone understood. So, what could one do when they wanted to relocate godly medicine plants? Wouldn't one suffer a huge loss if their godly medicine was accidentally injured during transportation? Thus, virtual pouches were born. These pouches could forcefully restrain a domain of space, thus giving it the ability to hold living beings. As such, they could ensure the safety of godly medicines. However, the space that was restrained by these pouches was especially unstable. Generally speaking, they could only hold plants. If animals were placed inside, the restrained space would be severely affected. In fact, it would even crumble at the slightest of stimulations. Even with so many constraints, the lifespan of a virtual pouch was still relatively short. However, the advantage was that they could be refined by heavenly body tier elites, unlike spatial god tools which could only be refined by those at the Genesis tier. The elder watched on from the side. Once Empress Wuque placed the lotus into the virtual pouch, he immediately charged toward her. 4 heavenly bodies hovered behind him, each of them exuding a profoundly ancient aura. Boom! He immediately unleashed his trump card. He needed time to prepare this, but Empress Wuque had been focused on digging the godly medicine just then. This gave him the opportunity and time to prepare. This strike was extremely devastating. The seawater around them instantly disappeared, and the gigantic fish within a 500-kilometer radius all exploded and died. Meanwhile, the elder's most powerful attack transformed into a black spear that continued to stab toward Empress Wuque's waist. He still wanted to obtain the tricolor wind and fire lotus. Empress Wuque flared up in rage. She roared softly, and her slender hands pressed backward, causing thousands of divine patterns to intertwine and knit into a net that flew toward the elder. A ruler was enraged, and heaven and earth lost their luster. They were both at the heavenly body tier, yet Empress Wuque was clearly more powerful. Her net enveloped the black spear and ripped it to shreds. Pooh! A crimson light shot through the net at this moment, whizzing toward Empress Wuque's neck. Empress Wuque hurriedly dodged to the side. However, the crimson light followed her movement with incredible accuracy and speed. In the end, it pierced into her hand. Ha 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 ha. The elder laughed heartily, appearing especially smug. Your Majesty, you've already been hit by Crimson Fire Needle. If I don't remove its effects, your blood will be evaporated drop by drop. You'll die an extremely miserable death. Hand the tricolor wind and fire lotus over, and I can spare you from death. You're a beautiful woman, after all, and it'll be a shame for you to die like this." There was a peculiar glint flashing in the elder's eyes. She was a breathtaking beauty, yet she had been captured by him. Moreover, she was also the empress of a majestic empire. If he could make her his obedient slave, what kind of power would fall into his hands? Great stars hovered behind Empress Luanxing's back. The aura that they exuded made one shudder, with even the elder's heart thumping in palpitation. Too powerful, she's too powerful. We're both at the consummate level of the heavenly body tier, so why is the difference between us so large? Fortunately, she had given him enough time to unleash his most powerful attack. He had more so been able to use an ancient god tool. That crimson fire needle had been launched by his saint-destroying crossbow. What was a saint? Only those who reached the Genesis tier could be referred to as saints. Meanwhile, this treasure was called the saint-destroying crossbow, which revealed just how mighty it was. However, the saint-destroying crossbow that the elder had received was a damaged one. Thus, it couldn't even kill elites at the Eternal River tier, much less the Genesis tier. However, it was still extremely effective against those at the Heavenly Body tier. "You're a member of the Dark Knight Hall?" Empress Luanxing didn't move, instead choosing to question the elder in a solemn tone. The elder's heart jolted. How did she guess? Did I slip up somewhere? However, there was no doubt that she had been hit by the crimson fire needle. Thinking of this, the elder became relaxed again. Indeed. He confidently admitted his identity, and said, "How did you find out?" Empress Luanxing didn't answer his question, instead saying, "In that case, this was a trap all along. You discovered the Tricolor Wind and Fire Lotus, and I also happened to be nearby. You realized that I would come over sooner or later, so you purposefully pretended that you discovered it at the same moment as me. However, you were taking that as an opportunity to kill me. Hee, your majesty is so wise. Everything is as you said." Now that it had come to this, the elder didn't hide his intentions anymore, saying, "However, I suggest you rid yourself of your fanciful thoughts, your majesty. The more time you waste, the more of your blood will be evaporated." "Detestable thief," Empress Luanxing said in contempt. She raised her jade-like hand, and boundless might formed, releasing a terrifying pressure. The elder's expression changed drastically. She was hit by the crimson fire needle, so how can she still wield her power? Wasn't her origin power all evaporated a long time ago? Chapter 1107, Might of the Empress. Empress Luanxing moved, and streaks of regulations transformed into divine chains that flew out from her jade-like palm and rained down on the elder from the Dark Knight Hall. This elder was definitely one of the strongest members of the Dark Knight Hall. How many people in this universe could cultivate to the consummate level of the heavenly body tier? Moreover, what kind of treasure was the saint-destroying crossbow? It was definitely a supreme treasure of the Dark Knight Hall. However, this elder could bring it out, so he was definitely an upper-level individual at the Dark Knight Hall. Light radiated from the elder's body as he let out a roar. He had looked extremely old just then, yet his life essence was soaring through the heavens at this moment. He was fighting with his life on the line. "Crush him!" Empress Luanxing cried softly. Countless divine chains swarmed about as her hands pressed down. This was the manifestation of Tao, and it could display one's comprehension of the great Tao of heaven and earth. The elder combusted his blood essence. He still believed that the Empress had been hit by his crimson fire needle, meaning that her blood was still being continuously evaporated. She was definitely a spent force, and she definitely couldn't last for much longer. As long as he endured through this, the seductive beauty who was renowned throughout the galaxy would become his plaything. His heart rippled with excitement as this thought crossed his mind. His mental state, which he had cultivated for tens of millions of years, became like that of a lustful youth. He was feeling extremely thirsty. "I'll achieve victory as long as I endure through this." Capturing this proud empress was probably the dream of countless elites. If he succeeded, how satisfied would his vanity be? Pung! The Elder was sent flying with a single strike. In fact, even his origin power armor disappeared. Seawater rushed toward him, drenching his hair and his clothes. Wah! The Elder spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was filled with shock, and he stammered, "How is your power still so strong?" They were both at the peak stage of the consummate level of the heavenly body tier, and he was more so a 4-star genius. Theoretically speaking, Empress Wuque only possessed a battle prowess that was 1 star more powerful than him. However, judging by their exchange just then, the difference between their battle prowess was definitely more than 1 star. It was at least 3 stars. How is this possible? How? Empress Wuque didn't reply, instead saying, "Treacherous thief, die." She had the mindset of a ruler, and the world had to listen to her commands. No one was allowed to defy her. The Elder retrieved a helmet and put it on. Regulations of the Great Tao instantly flowed down from the helmet, intertwining to form divine patterns that stuck to his body. At a rough glance, there were at least 1,000 divine patterns. He was a super elite to begin with, so he already possessed over 3,000 divine patterns. Add to that the 1,000 from the helmet, and the aura that radiated from his body instantly soared explosively. Right now, he was already no weaker than Empress Wuque. "Kakaka, don't forget that I'm from the Dark Night Hall," the Elder said arrogantly. "We've existed for even longer than the 3 majestic empires, so the richness of resources that we possess is far beyond your Majesty's imagination. You're nothing but a weakling who relies on external tools." Empress Wuque said coldly. Her divine chains transformed into sabers, spears, swords, and crossbows as they rained down from the sky. This was truly terrifying. It was as if the sky were about to collapse, and it was as if even the heavens wanted to punish the Elder from the Dark Night Hall. The Elder's expression changed drastically. He had clearly activated a high-level god tool already, yet at this moment, he had no confidence that he could win. He felt that the seductive beauty opposite him was powerful enough to make his hair stand on ends. He finally retrieved a black crossbow that was engraved with complex divine patterns. However, this crossbow was damaged, and many of the divine patterns only had half or even just a third of their patterns remaining. Even so, this didn't stop the crossbow from being powerful. The Elder didn't hide the existence of this crossbow with his power anymore, and the space around them was instantly permeated by a terrifying killing intent. It was as if this aura could kill gods and slay saints. Saint-destroying crossbow. "Your Majesty, I suggest that you surrender." "Hee, I brought 3 crimson fire needles this time, and you've already been hit by one of them. If you're hit by another, even I won't be able to save you. I can only watch a beauty die before my eyes." Empress Wuque didn't take his words to heart. She pressed her palm down, and the entire world instantly became dark. Countless divine chains slithered down, moving to slay the Elder. Humph. A fierce look appeared in the Elder's eyes. Although he wanted to capture this seductive beauty, his own life was far more important in comparison. At this moment, he didn't have any crooked thoughts anymore. He lashed out with his palm, causing thousands of divine patterns to intertwine and form a wall before him. Meanwhile, he activated the saint-destroying crossbow. He was going to launch an earth-shattering attack. In terms of strength, he was a few pegs below Empress Wuque. However, the helmet on his head increased his strength and mitigated at least 1 star of difference between them. Thus, even if he wasn't her opponent, at least he wouldn't be defeated in an instant. He was buying time to activate the saint-destroying crossbow. With this and the crimson fire needles, even heavenly body tier elites would suffer certain defeat. Even if 1 crimson fire needle weren't enough, there were still another 2. The saint-destroying crossbow was finally activated. The quality of this god tool was far too high, and even though the Elder possessed an astonishing power, he still felt strained after activating it for 2 times in quick succession. Sweat raced down his forehead, and even his aura started to become unstable. However, now that the saint-destroying crossbow was activated, a devastating aura instantly swept through the space around them. This was still a saint tool, even though it was damaged and its might was reduced. A serious expression appeared on Empress Luanxing's face. She didn't dare to be careless before such kind of saint tool. As she roared softly, 9 mountains materialized behind her back and crashed down on the elder. Go! The elder gritted his teeth, not having any more thoughts of getting lucky. He fired the crimson fire needle using the saint-destroying crossbow. A crimson light whizzed out and directly pierced through Empress Luanxing's regulations defense, continuing to fly toward her after it did so. The elder chuckled coldly. Once the saint-destroying crossbow was fired, its target would definitely be hit. This was unless one was more powerful than the saint-destroying crossbow. Meanwhile, the crimson fire needle could rapidly evaporate a cultivator's blood. Even heavenly body tier elites wouldn't be able to last for long. The Empress had already been struck once, yet she was still able to endure for the time being. However, the elder didn't believe that she could endure being struck again. Empress Luanxing had still dodged before, yet she didn't even make an attempt to dodge this time. The crimson light pierced through her chest. She's done for. The elder was happy yet regretful at the same time. The Empress was definitely going to die after being hit by 2 crimson fire needles. Even he wouldn't be able to save her. It was a great shame that this stunning beauty was going to die before he had even gotten the chance to savor her. However, a suspicious, even terrified look instantly appeared on his face. This was because Empress Luanxing was standing before him unscathed. Her vitality soared through the sky, while her domineering might was no weaker than before. What part of her looked like someone who had been struck by 2 crimson fire needles? Die! After dealing with the elder's attack, Empress Luanxing launched into a ferocious offensive. The space in the surroundings was shattered by her palm. The elder gritted his teeth, not a shred of fighting spirit left in him. He frantically turned around to flee. Empress Luanxing pursued him for a few steps before suddenly coming to a halt. Her aura had become slightly unstable. I was struck by his first surprise attack, and even my 9 deaths heaven art was unable to completely suppress the crimson fire needle. Luckily, I was prepared the second time, and was able to use this peculiar stone to block his attack. Assassins from the Dark Night Hall were naturally terrifying. The saint-destroying crossbow was more so a precious treasure that could suppress heavenly body tier elites. Humph, I'll slaughter you even if you escape to the ends of the world. She started to pursue him. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.